This journey of me following the migrants went from sort of 10 in the morning, all around the clock, to late at night, to the point where, you know, on buses, on trains, through streets, at every key point, French military police and the French police, they were there. They were on the bus, taking down notes, taking pictures, but not doing anything to deter the migrants or stop them, just being there. I was sat in the tent and he was showing me through photos of his phone, scrolling through. This was barbaric, horrific stuff. Blokes going through walls in vehicles and then jumping out and shooting everyone. You know, his WhatsApp picture was him with a mask on, with a gun like that.
You're in a tent with this guy?
I'm in a tent with this guy, and actually he's just showing me this stuff. I'm just thinking, this is not the kind of bloke you want to be coming to the UK.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Yes, welcome to the home of common sense. Thank you. It's so good to see Nick Dubois. He's off to do some Santa stuff now in Selfridges, I think. He's booked for the next couple of days. Thank you to Nick. Big show coming up this afternoon. The Conservatives closing in on reform as their combined strength challenges the left. Badenoch pledges Tory fortunes and doubts linger over Farage's team. But will a pact work? Or will it cause too much tension? Should the Tories and reform simply unite? What do you reckon to that? Lines are now open. Also this afternoon, the new EHRC chair, Mary Ann Stevenson, has warned against portraying migration as a national threat and urged honesty over demonisation, saying leaving the ECHR would be a mistake given its Human Rights Act protections. Well, she would say that, wouldn't she? More on that shortly. And Brighton and Hove museums have said that Father Christmas is too white and should be decolonised. You've got to decolonise Santa, haven't you? It urges parents to challenge the colonial gaze, prioritise joy over judgment and recast Santa as culturally diverse. What a load of old balls. Simple as that. We'll have more detail to come, everything you need to know, and all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. You can drop a voice note there as well, and of course you can message us on 87222. As Nick Dubois was just concurring, I think is the word, we are in an inevitable position, I think, with the Tories and Reform. Despite Reform doing incredibly well in the polls, leading the polls pretty much every day, you open a new poll, there they are yet again, way ahead. I mean, this is sort of Mo Farah of the political poll world at the moment. They are just simply going great guns. However, it is changing. So bear in mind what the last 6 months have looked like in terms of polling for Reform UK. And then get your listening gear around this. The end-of-year surveys have put Kemi Badenoch's party on 22%, up from 20% a month ago, suggesting that her improved Commons performance and fresh policy ideas are starting to cut through to voters. Reform have dropped to 25%. So they're kind of nearing a sort of neck-and-neck situation. The Conservative Party are going to win the next election. Kemi Badenoch is going to be the next Prime Minister. All of those big faces, Jenrick and co, that you see on the front bench, will be the next cabinet. Well, that's what they'd like you to believe. Will they manage to continue galvanising and improving their pole position? Will Nigel Farage's reform find themselves kind of evening out a little bit more? So it's sort of neck and necky between reform and the Conservative Party. This analysis does come, I should say, by the way, from the former deputy chairman of the Conservative Party, Lord Ashcroft, although his polling is much respected. It highlights the febrile state of right-wing politics. In the equivalent survey a month ago, Reform was 7 points ahead, a margin which could have put Mr Farage within striking distance of Downing Street. Now we're in that very same position where most people are looking at this saying that the right, if that's the way to look at it, can only really win if they merge together. And there's no real prospect of it being any other way. Now, of course, politics is a funny old game, isn't it? When politicians are asked about this and they talk about it, they have a very different approach. So let's have a listen, firstly, what the Tory leader, Kemi Badenoch, had said previously about Reform UK.
As we saw yesterday, Reform is not a serious political party. They have made this announcement without doing any work whatsoever on leaving the ECHR. We are a serious party.
They're not a serious party, but they are a party that you're probably about to get into bed with, Kemi. In the interest of balance, let's have a listen to Mr Farage talking about the Tories.
If you want a party to be the opposition party to this Labour government, then it's a Conservative vote that would be a wasted vote.
So that's where they're at now. You could categorise both of those comments with they would say that, wouldn't they? They're not about to say, yeah, it's a good idea, we're not strong enough on our own, so we're going to have to merge with this other outfit. That won't happen. In fact, you won't really see that until we approach an election. In fact, you might not see it until after an election. Can one of those parties win convincingly with a thumping majority on their own? At the moment, it suggests no. And if the left pulled together, by the way, so if you have the sort of Green Party, can you imagine? The Green Party, the Labour Party, and even throw the Lib Dems in. Do you remember the Lib Dems? Breaking news, still going, apparently. The Lib Dems are still going. You've got, 70-odd MPs, I think it is. Still going. Ed Davey, you know, the man that likes to unicycle his way around a swimming pool. Him, still functioning as a party. If you put all those together, they could beat Reform and the Tories, or maybe neck and neck. So we're in completely different territory from where we've ever been before in this respect. So the question that has to be asked, should the Tories and Reform unite? How would you feel about that? Bearing in mind, Reform UK is, I would say, mostly made up of former Conservatives. Nigel Farage, Richard Tice, Danny Kruger, to name three obvious faces. Lee Anderson, of course, famously. Former was he deputy chair of the Tory party, wasn't he? Was he chair for a while? So they're all former Tories anyway. Now, many people left the Tories because they didn't trust them, and many people listening to this right now have left the Tories because they didn't trust them. So how would you then feel if the party you left is about to get into bed with the party you joined? Reform and the Tories uniting. It is arguably, based on current situation in the polling, is the only way you would get a centre-right party. You couldn't get it any other way. Not in any convincing manner. 0344 499 1000. Let's get a word on this and the other big stories of the day. Oscar Redrop is back with us. He, of course, is a former number 10 advisor. Oscar, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Always
good afternoon.
Good. I like the way you said it twice as well. It's a special festive way of saying good afternoon. Yeah,
you've got a nice tree behind you as well, Ian.
A nice tree, very real tree as well. It's looking good. I think that I can see some tinsel in your own dwelling there as well.
Completely fake.
We are, listen, well, we're fully festive at this end, which is good. So, I mean, this is the obvious one, isn't it? What are you making of this in terms of the Tories and Reform? This is not a new story in itself, but it's gathered a bit more momentum as Kemi Badenoch's star begins to rise.
Completely. There would have been a point in time, maybe 6 or 7 months ago, where when you looked at all the leaders, Kemi's position was probably the most perilous. And the idea of a pact of some sort felt almost like a begging bowl from the Conservative briefing that was going on. Why the hell would Farage need the Tories at any point in time at that time? But now when you look at it, Kemi has really, really, really grown into the role. She feels confident now. She's been able to draw out a distinct flavour on the right, as in a distinction between what the Conservatives can offer and Reform. Meanwhile, Farage has had a couple of difficulties, all the stuff, school days haunting him, which, depending on your sensibilities, you'll think is unfair and ridiculous, but nonetheless has been in the headlines, has been chipping away at him. I think there's a sense of Reform, almost have they kind of not run out of steam, but are we only getting one note? What other sides do they have? What other discipline in terms of economics can they show? Are we just going to keep getting these old Tory MPs moving across the line to Reform? And how does that sit with people who, you rightly said, never want to see the Tories in power again? And that's in some ways why they found a home at Reform. Yeah. And so these kind of lines going in slightly different trajectories between the two parties, and they're kind of a bit at the moment neck and neck in a way. And we are so far away from that election. I think, any talk of uniting and power will really hack off dedicated Reform voters, and likewise with the Conservatives, you will hack off dedicated Conservative voters. So I think what you said, I think was the most interesting thing in a way. We might not even find out till after the election. Yeah. Because it could be that fragmented, that close between the left and the right in this country. And I think that in some ways, I think that's where we might see some of the negotiations happening. And the thing that I can't get my head around, though, Farage he's such a huge personality. Is he really going to want to take a B-side role if he had to, if it came to it? See, I just don't see it. And from a Conservative perspective, there are real, true, genuine, traditional Conservatives who still see Farage as the enemy. He is the guy who wants to destroy them. And there are some wound-inflicting Conservatives who would rather Keir Starmer and Labour stayed in power than Farage. Those Tories exist. I personally, I can't get my head into that necessarily, but those Tories exist.
You're absolutely right. The idea of getting into bed with Nigel Farage for some of those Conservatives is about as ridiculous as getting into bed with Jeremy Corbyn.
Exactly.
In fact, it's worse in some ways for many of those Conservatives.
Yeah, it is visceral, and it is historic. From I don't see it quite along those lines, but for certain types of Conservatives, Farage has been hell-bent on destroying that party for decades, and the idea of getting into bed and partnership with him is ludicrous. What I would say, though, and this is the thing that I think has not been properly priced in yet, is, and it's a real question, I don't know the answer, but I think it's highly unlikely that Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves, that access, will be in charge of the Labour Party and by default the country by the time the next election comes around.
I agree.
So that's always what you're measuring the success or lack of the two, the Reform and Conservative. You're measuring it against what we're being governed by right now, which is truly shocking. I think I can't find, there's not one reasonable person in this country who could look you in the eye and say Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer are doing a fine, good job. It just doesn't happen. So what will our government look like at that point? Will it be Wes Streeting? Will we have a really hard left kind of Rayner access government?
I think we will. I think that's exactly the direction of travel. But of course, the other thing that, as you rightly said there, Oscar, Starmer and Rachel Reeves may not be leading the Labour Party. We forget that what happens in the fullness of time with politics, there'll be the odd scandal, possibly in all parties they'll have at least one. So somebody that you can't imagine not being there won't be there. Somebody will come to the forefront that previously you didn't think about. There's all of these things that can happen in that time. Somebody quits that you didn't expect to. So there's all of these issues that could happen. And when we've still got another, 3.5 years
Yeah. But what it really, when we talk about leaders and their trajectory, I mean, so, you know, in terms of sell-by date, Keir Starmer's just this mouldy pint of milk that should have been thrown out months ago. But Kemi Badenoch's stock is really rising, and I don't think a lot of people saw it coming. I think people thought she was in a lot of trouble. Zero cut through, you know, for someone who was seen as a bit of a firebrand. You know, PMQs that were missing the mark every week, and it's like, where has she come from? She's gone from Wolverhampton Wanderers to Man City in weeks, and it's really remarkable. And I truly believe that she will feel really emboldened. And yes, there might be murmurings of, oh, should we do a pact here? Should we do a pact there? But I'm convinced she'll be sat there right now at Christmas time, taking stock, and she'll thinking, I can do this. I can do this on my own. And you know, as you said, events, you know, dear boy, events, and we'll see what happens. But I tend to think she could, and I think she's aged so well when those defectors were going across, and she said, well, they can, if that's what they want to do, they can do it. And at the time that seemed very, very irresponsible, but almost since that moment she is becoming a leader. And I think it's quite an exciting time to be a Conservative under Kemi at the moment. I really do.
We will, we'll watch with interest, because, of course, the challenge now is to not just keep it up if you're Kemi Badenoch, but, you know, to grow on that as well. And there's got to be some big standout moments that she owns over the next year or so, and that will further galvanise her position.
Just on that, and I remember it from the days of Boris, and it's one thing, you know, that obviously loath to say, but Keir Starmer was very successful at. He got scalps, including Boris. That's basically all they did in opposition. They didn't formulate serious policy. They clearly didn't get ready for government, but they took scalps. And Kemi Badenoch needs to own what I think is going to be the inevitable fall of Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer. She's done it very well with Rachel Reeves, I think. She did it well with Mandelson. She needs to take scalps. And people listening at home might hate that, because they think, well, I just want politicians to do policy and make the country better. Of course they bloody well should, but they don't always. It's about getting scalps. And I think if Kemi can really own that, the world's her oyster.
100%. Let's get a quick word on this one as well. The new chair of the Equality and Human Rights Commission, this is Mary-Ann Stevenson, has warned against portraying migration as a risk to Britain and urged an end to the demonisation of immigrants. This is her first, if you like, major intervention. She also said leaving the European Convention of Human Rights would be a mistake. Let's have a listen to what she said.
The demonisation of migrants, the creating this idea that migration causes, you know, huge risks for the country, can make the lives not just of migrants to the UK, but of ethnic minority UK citizens very, very difficult. I think leaving the European Convention is a mistake. It weakens the rights that all of us depend on.
I mean, it's an interesting intervention. I mean, maybe that's, you know, she's Equality and Human Rights Commission head. That's, I guess, the kind of way you might speak about these things. Quite a generalisation, I felt, though, Oscar.
Yeah, very much so. And not the right messenger. I mean, honestly, it's the first rule in campaigning in some ways, is that the most powerful messenger is particularly when your back's against the wall, you need your third parties. They clearly don't have many. So for them to come out and kind of, we don't want our business model in many ways threatened, is what it felt like to me. But yeah, sweeping generalisation, I think clearly hasn't spent any time in the communities that have felt entirely under pressure by it as an issue, in some, as we know, in some really, really grim, horrible ways in which it affects this country. So clearly hasn't spent much time outside her bubble. But I would play that. I mean, if there are any MPs out there who are having reservations as to why we should or we shouldn't leave the ECHR, they should just play that clip, because that is clearly someone who is absolutely head in the clouds, completely unaware of the communities it does affect in this country. And yeah, I mean, staggering. I still think there is a battle, though, within the government at the moment. You know, they're clearly not willing to do that. There are a lot of Labour lords, very senior Labour lords, who are pressuring Keir Starmer on the issue to do it. The new Home Secretary is pretty tough, I would say, or has talked pretty tough.
Yeah.
But if they do not leave, then we will never truly solve this issue.
And why do we need an Equality and Human Rights Commission anyway? This was set up under Blair, wasn't it? This was, you know, this is not, it's got that sound as if it's something that's been there since 1951. This started in like 2006.
Absolutely. It's funny how time goes quite quickly. It is from a bygone era.
Yeah.
It sounds so incredibly dated. And for the general public out there who are listening and watching now, who do jobs, yeah, who go to work every day and they do a job, that they would be terrified and probably disgusted by the amount of fake, weird, quango-y, nothing-y jobs that are all six-figure salary, that all mean nothing, they do nothing, and they just oversee
100%
kind of decay. And
they've got an annual budget of the thick end of 20 million. They employ 200 people, and you think, what do they do all day over there at the EHRC? I think that and other similar quangos, as you mentioned there, should be counting down the days in many respects, not in a good way, to the next election, because they probably won't exist. Oscar, stay with us. Loads more to come from Oscar Redrop with us discussing the big stories of the day. Over to you as well, particularly on that question. Should the Tories and Reform unite? We've asked the question before, but it has a new found resonance, really, looking at the polls, which are more favourable to Kemi Baden. Not a bit of a dip for Reform UK, although they're still very much ahead. Thoughts on that? Should they just merge and have done with and get over it? Our lines are open. This is Talk.
Brand new for 2026. It's going to be the only way to start your day. It's the home of common sense. It's where the nation can come to speak about the day's news. It's the Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show. You know who you are. You get up, you graft, you work hard. I'm here for you. We want to hear your side. Promise you one thing. It is where the nation can and will come to talk. The Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show, weekdays from 6 a.m.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is talk at Christmas, a couple of days ago, before Santa drops one down your chimney. And believe me, there are savoury delights to be had. We're full of chocolate and festive cheer at this end, and that is made even brighter by the presence of Oscar Redrop, former number 10 advisor, talking us through the big stories of the day.
What an intro.
I don't take Christmas seriously unless you're part of it, to be honest, Oscar. In fact, I can't even believe you're not joining us around our table on the 25th, but that's another story.
Yeah, I'm drunk. I'm going to be too drunk here. That's what it is.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Let's move to this story. Not a particularly festive one, but nonetheless, it is a reality of our time. Shoplifters getting away with a theft nearly every minute in this country, with over 800 offences a day being closed without a suspect, and unsolved cases up 65% in the last 5 years. Labour has vowed, of course, to tackle the epidemic, but they've been saying this forever, it seems. Let's have a listen.
So today I'm putting shoplifters on notice. You might get away with it under this weak Tory government, but if Labour takes power, we won't stand by while crime takes over our streets. We'll put 13,000 extra neighbourhood police on the beat. We'll scrap the shoplifters' charter, the £200 rule that stops the police investigating theft in your workplace. And we'll legislate to make sure assaulting and abusing shop workers is a standalone criminal offence, because you deserve to feel safe at work.
It's just that sort of very weak phrase, I'm putting shoplifters on notice. I've just got this image of Kenny the shoplifter saying to his mate, well, I was going to go out and do a bit of half-inching round boots this afternoon, but I've been put on notice, haven't I? So I've had to cancel it. I was going to trouser a few goods from the electronics store, but no more, because Keir said no. Look, I mean, all right, he's the Prime Minister, he's got to say something about this, but it's pretty woeful, because nothing's really happened.
Yeah, it is pretty woeful. In fairness to Keir Starmer, wow, here we go, breaking news. But it is a problem that did predate him. I think that whole tough hard man act I've never seen that clip before, but was just excruciating.
Isn't it?
Like, yeah,
he can't really do tough, can he?
Gareth Keenan from The Office kind of thing. Yeah. But no, it is a huge problem. There's a slight elephant in the room, because yes, it'd be very easy for me to come on here and obviously rightly say that, you know, shoplifters and shoplifting is a crime. It should be treated as such. It's getting worse and worse and worse. Yeah. That's awful. But I do think these big supermarkets that have, you know, they've kind of almost built it. I mean, with the self-checkout system now, that complete lack of human interaction, you know, you go into supermarkets and there's, you know, big decent-sized supermarket, and there's about 2 people working in it.
Yeah.
You know, plus 1 security guard, you know, and
who doesn't look like he can run very fast, even if he had to.
Exactly. And I can't help but feel, and my God, on the criminality side, I'm not making any excuses whatsoever, and we do have a very, very weak government. And the Tories were not brilliant on this, but it's got even weaker. But I do have to think that these big supermarkets, they've probably written it into their bottom line.
Yeah.
They go, well, look, we will suffer a lot more shopkeeping. We're going to lay off lots of human beings. The self-service will make, we'll be able to get more and more footfall, more and more goods through the tills. And yeah, we'll probably lose stock as a result of that to shoplifting, but we'll pay that price. It's worth it in terms of our bottom line. And so I don't know about you, but if we're talking on a bit more of a Christmassy, you know, I went into, are we allowed to say shop names here? It's a nice story.
Go for it.
I went into a Holland and Barrett.
Nice.
And they don't have self-service. They had people there.
Yeah.
And it was really bloody nice. And actually, he upsold me. You don't get upsold by a machine.
No.
He was like, oh, have you thought about this? You probably need that. You need this. You need that. And he upsold me. And I think as a society, yes, shoplifting is a crime and should be treated as such, particularly when the rest, you know, when people are, you know, so, you know, who do count, you know, absolutely their budget to the last pound in order to pay for their shopping. But at the same time, you know, as a society, I think we need that human interaction back. And it's the same with cash. You know, you see people not being able to pay with cash. Oh, you know, old men and women going to a shop and being turned away because they've got cash.
Yeah, because they've got the audacity to carry legal tender, as the phrase goes, with them. Let's finally move on to this one, because I want to squeeze this one in because it's really important. This is Brighton and Hove Museums, who are saying that Father Christmas should be decolonised and not too white. Scrap the naughty list, work alongside elves as equals, and add Mother Christmas is some of their advice. Soon this will be everyone's reaction to a politically correct Santa. Have a listen.
Don't tell him what you want. He's a liar. Let the kid talk. You disgust me. How can you live with yourself? Just cool it, Zippy. You sit on a throne of lies. Look, I'm not kidding. You're a fake. I'm a fake? Yes. How'd you like to be dead?
I've actually watched that film about 6 times in the last 2 weeks, I should add, Oscar. It's always a beauty. But this is another example of people who've got too much time on their hands, right?
Oh, God, yeah. And it's actually it's embarrassing. I mean, who the hell has sat there? And this is what we were saying before in terms of all the quangos and all these weird jobs that people get paid really decent money to do nothing.
Yeah.
There'd be people paid to sit around to kind of come up with this way of thinking and like this, these recommendations. It is completely insane. I do sometimes think, are they doing this deliberately?
Yes, they are. So that people like us will talk about it.
Yeah, to really wind people up and get us to talk about it. In which case, if you're watching this, Brighton and Hove Museums Collective, you well done.
Yeah, and happy
Christmas. But it's embarrassing. A merry, miserable Christmas to you.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Listen, on that point, Oscar, you have a lovely Christmas. We will speak again, of course, in 2026. He is Oscar Redrop, one of our favourites on the programme, former number 10 advisor. And, of course, if you want to pick up on anything you've heard there, 0344 499 1000. You can drop us a voice note on that number as well. Should the Tories and Reform unite, all the other bits and pieces that are up and running too, you can message 87222. The time now, 1:30.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, just gone 1:30. We'll come to your calls and comments in just a bit. But I do want to look at the story we began with, Kemi Badenoch having a bit of a Christmas surge as the Tories are managing to claw back to just 3 points behind Reform UK. I mean, that kind of headline would have been unthinkable, wouldn't it, half an hour ago when Reform, newish party, I know they have a different sort of, UKIP, Brexit party, there's been sort of various types of parties with Nigel Farage in them over the years, but nonetheless, they sit there with 5 MPs and a commanding lead in the polls. Only a month ago, Reform led by 7 points. Now, Farage's charge has stalled, and any path to number 10 could hinge on a deal with the Tories. But then, of course, you've got the left as well. There's lots of things going on with the Green Party. What's happening with the Labour front bench? Will they morph into something slightly more left-wing and more palatable to those on the left? Let's start by speaking with Martin Abrams, Green Party councillor in Streatham. Martin, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian.
It's interesting, isn't it? Whether you're left-wing or right-wing, I mean, what we're seeing in the last sort of year or so is a complete change in the landscape of the two-party political system.
Well, I think we are, and I'm not sure our electoral system can actually cope with the ongoing sort of turmoil that we're seeing, particularly at the centre and the right of British politics, because what's happening, Ian, is that Britain's old politics are essentially collapsing under their failure to deliver for people. And you know, the polls today that suggest that Reform UK and the Conservatives are neck and neck, whilst Labour is languishing in lower and lower support. You know, and both main parties are struggling to articulate, you know, really bold solutions to the issues facing everyday people. And you know, it's encouraging to see that the Green Party is surging, you know, record polling. And, you know, that's because people are looking for a credible alternative that actually recognises and tackles the crises of our time.
And it's interesting because in this particular, I know polls go up and down and, you know, they change often depending on who put them together. But on this one, Labour fall into fourth position behind the Greens. Now, I say this kindly, Martin, you're a Green Party supporter, but other than you and my mate Smelly Ken, I don't know anyone else who votes Green. So there's two people I know, but you're ahead of Labour in the polls.
Well, you know, there's an increasing number of people that are going to be voting Green, and we're going to see that in May 2026. We'll see it in forthcoming elections. I'm sure the Scottish and the Welsh elections as well will return record numbers of Green politicians as well. And you know, that's because, you know, people are looking for that credible alternative. You know, people don't just want the chaos and the culture wars. And I think, you know, whilst Nigel Farage, you know, you've got to recognise, whilst I have literally nothing in common with Nigel Farage politically, he is a talented political player. But people are now starting to ask the question: is he going to fix what is actually broken? Because all he ever talks about is immigration. And I'm sorry, whilst that is an important issue, and my view is that we need a much more humane immigration system that puts people at its heart. There are way more important things out there that people are concerned about, such as the cost of living crisis, such as access to healthcare, such as housing. So, you know, he doesn't really seem to have the answers to those crises facing the country.
But is he not playing in the same way that your leader, Zach Polansky, is kind of... And there's people have drawn a certain synergy between the two. There's the kind of green populism, the conservative populism from Farage, green populism from Zach. It's a kind of similar game, isn't it, that you sort of appeal to those very raw areas of people's ideology and you grow them a little bit, you pepper on a bit of hyperbole and, you know, you run with it. And so net zero and areas such as that would be the sort of the green fascination. Mr. Farage, immigration and things such as that. Is that not the era we're now in? Are you both not, to kind of put it the way you put it, guilty of the same thing?
Well, I think actually the main priority for the Green Party at the moment is the cost of living crisis and how unequal our society has become. When you've got 50 families in the UK hoarding the same amount of wealth as the poorest 50%. So we're talking 50 families have more wealth than more than 35 million people in the UK. There is something deeply wrong with our society. And, you know, whilst...
So would you just nick the money off people who've done better in life?
Well...
Because they're not rich. The people that are poor aren't poor because those people are rich.
Well, it's about equality, Ian. And the fact is there's enough wealth and resources in our world for everyone to have a decent...
So you'd have to steal the money
decent standard of living. No, it's not about stealing the money, Ian. It's about redistributive policies. And if
that's a polite way of saying stealing the money, isn't it?
Listen, you need to look up the group Patriotic Millionaires.
I'm familiar with. We've had them on the programme. They're happy to give more money.
They're absolutely desperate to pay in more money to our society to make our society a better place, not just for them, but for everyone.
And they can do that voluntarily, of course, already.
Well, they can, but it's much better if there is a system that is redistributive and allows some of the poorest people to have a decent roof over their head, to be able to put food on the table, and to be able to have a decent standard of living. We're in 2025. We're the 6th richest country in the world. There should be no people struggling to heat or eat this Christmas. And unfortunately, there's millions and millions of people that are going to be really, really worried about how they're going to pay their bills, pay for food, pay for everything over the course of Christmas. So that's why the Greens are polling very well, because they're talking about these things. They're talking about the real issues that matter to people.
In terms of the kind of notion behind this particular poll, which is sort of hints at parties getting together. So if, for example, the Tories and Reform were to get together, that would be a big force against Labour, and they would doubtlessly win an election. However, if Labour and the Greens and possibly the Lib Dems were in a kind of a pact, and yes, the Lib Dems do still exist, I had to remind everybody that a little earlier, they're still around. If they got together, that would potentially give the right a bloody nose. Is that something, as a Green politician, that you would endorse?
I mean, I'm not an official spokesperson for the Green Party, but I can safely say that, Zach Polanski has already stated that he would not go into a electoral pact with the Labour Party.
They all say that, though, don't they?
Keir Starmer's leadership.
Till somebody offers him a nice limo and a big red box, he'd be in there like a robber's dog, wouldn't he?
Listen, Zach Polanski is not in it for himself.
He's an actor, isn't he? Of course he is.
That's patently clear.
He loves it. He loves it. They all love it. Come on.
Listen, the fact
he wants to be a big star. He wants to be on the world stage, pressing the flesh with the leaders around the world.
At the moment, under Keir Starmer's leadership, the Labour Party are much more closely aligned with Reform UK than they are to the Green Party.
That's interesting.
So I think it's clear that Keir Starmer's days are numbered as a leader. His unpopularity is at record levels.
I think we can all agree on that.
The new year is almost certainly going to bring a leadership challenge.
Certainly
within Labour. And, it'll be interesting to see who takes over. There's talk of Wes Streeting, there's talk of Andy Burnham, there's talk of
Angela Rayner making a
Angela
trip
Rayner
back.
And a number of other
She's more your cup of tea, though, isn't she, Angela Rayner? You could work with Angela Rayner as one of the leaders.
Well, listen, Angela Rayner is from a more traditional Labour background than Keir Starmer. I think she actually understands, where the Labour Party has come from and the importance of the trade union movement.
Yeah.
But she is also intrinsically linked with Keir Starmer's government
and creative accounting as well.
Albeit she's not in it at the moment, but it's going to be very interesting. 2026 is going to be a fascinating year.
It really is.
It's going to be a very successful year for the Green Party, and politics is going to change probably beyond recognition.
We absolutely agree on that. I can't wait for May's elections, I have to say. I'm more excited about that than I am Christmas, frankly. So we'll look forward to it. We'll speak many times, I'm sure, before then. Martin, thank you, sir. Martin Abrahams, Green Party councillor for Streatham, with us on the programme. Let's speak to Gwaine Towler, political strategist and Reform UK board member. Gwaine, firstly, your assessment, I'm bound to ask. I know you were listening to some of that conversation with Martin. What did you make of what you just heard?
Well, I think it's good to be ambitious, and I think that something. My favourite line, I think, was the idea that the Reform are more aligned to Labour than the Green Party are.
That was a bit of a howler, that one, wasn't it? Goodness me.
But okay, as I say, it's good to have ambition, and yes, it's fascinating. But I think one of the things he was saying isn't true, and that is that what we're seeing now is a fragmentation on the left and the right. But I think on the left, the fragmentation is far greater, with the Labour Party, the Greens, the Lib Dems, and Hezbollah. and the Gaza independence. So there's a far greater level of split. But I've come to the conclusion that what we are seeing is, you know how after Christmas, when you're tidying up the mess, it looks a hell of a lot messier initially than when you finish. You start with one thing, It becomes very messy, and then it tidies up again. I would suggest that what we're seeing is a realignment rather than a permanent fragmentation. And I look at Northern Ireland to see what happened there over a period of time, where the SDLP and the Ulster Unionists have vanished from the scene to be replaced by other parties. There was a period where Sinn Féin and the SDLP were vying, and then Sinn Féin took over, and so on and so forth. So I would say the likelihood is we're seeing a realignment rather than a plain fragmentation.
It's interesting looking at this Ashcroft polling, and I know it's Ashcroft, and one could, argue, well, look who's done the polling. There is always
it's not so much look who's done the polling. Look at the rating of that pollster.
In terms of as a trusted pollster, you mean?
Trusted pollster, yes, it is at the very bottom.
Okay.
But I have a policy that you should never believe a poll that makes you smile, nor should one believe necessarily a poll that makes one weep. The two things are, it's like Kipling, and you take failure and success and treat both imposters the same. And I think that's a point to make.
But Gwen, is it fair to say though that I think you're right on that, of course, but if you take the sort of collective nature of recent polling, it does seem to suggest that unless the Tories and Reform got into bed together in some way, shape or form, then neither party could win an outright majority in a general election.
Well, I beg to differ, and I wouldn't I? But if you look at the Lord Ashcroft poll, which concluded on the 15th of December, since then there have been 4 other polls. The most recent, on the 17th, had Reform on a 15 points lead from Find Out Now, a 9 points lead from More in Common, a 10 points lead from YouGov. I think Lord Ashcroft's poll is definitely an outlier. That doesn't mean that there isn't a trend, and I do think there was a flattening over the autumn and coming into winter for the Reform thing, but it seems to be picking up. The most recent is 33%, with the Tories down on 18. So whilst if I was Kemi, I would be holding fast to the Lord Ashcroft poll, it would be possibly foolish to do so and set your strategy based on it. We heard, did we not, the vice chairman of the Tory party talking about doing possible deals. It is fascinating to note that in the last 2 years, I've heard this idea floated time and time and time again, but it's never floated by Reform. We saw what the Tories did to the Brexit Party, and what the Brexit Party did in 2019. There was no deal done there, but there was certainly never any thanks. And I think you saw what happened to the Lib Dems when they went into a deal with the Tory party. We have no reason to trust them. And it cannot be in either our or the country's interest to bring back a bunch of people who have failed the country so devastatingly over the last 20 years.
And I think there's certainly a lot of sense from our listeners this afternoon on exactly that point. Gwaine, thank you as ever for your time. Gwaine Towler. Have a great Christmas, Gwaine. Political strategist, Reform UK board member. He knows his way around this kind of area of political life. I still come back to what looks, as we sit here today, like an inevitability. That Tories and Reform will have to have some kind of pact. Then, of course, there's events, dear boy, and all that business. There's that to contend with. Between now and 2029, you'll have some very high-profile figures who simply won't be there anymore. It seems unthinkable now because they'll have quit or they'll have been fired. There might have been a scandal. They might have just got fed up. They might have been demoted. There could be all sorts of reasons. But neither Reform nor the Tories will look exactly like they look today. Things will change. Different people's stars begin to rise. Others begin to fall. Either way, whatever way you slice it, I still come back. I know Gwaine resisted this and he acknowledged that he would say that, wouldn't he? However, Reform and the Tories will have to get together at some point. Would you concur with that? 0344 499 1000.
brand new for 2026. It's going to be the only way to start your day. It's the home of common sense. It's where the nation can come to speak about the day's news. It's the Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show. You know who you are. You get up, you graft, you work hard. I'm here for you. We want to hear your side. Promise you one thing. It is where the nation can and will come to talk. The Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show, weekdays from 6 a.m.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Let's go to your calls. Matthew is in Cheshire, who starts us off. Matthew, what are you thinking? Afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. Always a pleasure, never a chore.
Hey, same here. What are you thinking today?
I think we're all jumping the gun a bit here. It's Christmas, everyone's a bit quiet, everyone's starting to snip home. Let's get these May elections sorted. Let the working man go out and vote, and them votes will tell you who's going to be making the next government. Because one, if the Tories fall on the backsides, which is a good chance they will, because Reform will get all the council seats, there'll be a headhunt then, they'll want a new leadership battle. So all this good work that's just done will just go by the wayside.
Are people voting, though, Matthew? And I'm always interested in this, and I don't think it's changed fundamentally over the years, but do people vote on a feeling, or do they vote on a well thought out political roadmap? Do they look at Reform, for example, and go, yeah, what they're saying about education and our trading deals with Commonwealth countries makes sense, or is it just a feeling of hope?
I think these next elections will be a feeling of change. In the past, we've all voted because of manifestos and this Labour government, because they've just basically gone against everything, or made their own manifestos up and moved the goalposts so wide that people will have enough. And I think there'll be a lot more people voting this time round in local elections than there ever has been in years, because normally, what do you normally get, about 30-40% voting on local elections?
Yep, something like that,
I reckon you'll get over 50-60% because people have had enough. There's that many people hate Starmer and this Labour Party. They will want him out.
Yeah.
I messaged in this morning. I went to Chester yesterday on the Christmas markets, and there was socks being sold on a stall saying Keir Starmer is a merchant banker, or words to that effect.
So really? On a pair of socks?
Yeah, honestly, yeah. It's hilarious.
Somebody thought of that. Obviously, and had them made.
Say merchant.
He didn't say merchant banker. Yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah. But this. I'm 55, and I remember the Gallagher as a small child and Labour in the 70s.
Yeah.
And this government has got to be the worst government we have ever had. And I don't think the only problem I've got with it now is that whoever takes over, we thought it was bad last time, Labour, and there's going to be no money, there's going to be no land, there's going to be no gold, there's going to be nothing except net zero. So we'll all be living on solar. That's it. And we'll all be taxed. We'll all be paying for everything. Like that green guy there, he was saying before, people shouldn't be able to afford to warm the houses. It's not the top five people in the country that should be paying that. Yeah. It should be the fuel companies that are charging us, and the government letting them do it.
Yeah.
Everything's wrong, mate. Everything's wrong.
Everything is wrong. You're absolutely spot on. Listen, Matthew, have a cracking Christmas. Enjoy those socks, by the way. Maybe you did buy a pair. I would have done. Thank you for that, Matthew in Cheshire. Daniel is in Epsom. What have you got for us, Dan? Good afternoon.
Merry Christmas, Ian.
You too.
I just want to say, how on earth could Reform and the Conservative Party kind of merge? They can't, because the Conservative Party is two parties, isn't it? One half of the Conservative Party, which is actually of the right, could probably merge and help Nigel. But the other half, that are the weak, centrist, consocialist, kind of Lib Dems in blue ties types, they're incompatible. The Tories haven't quite worked out that those weak centrists are the reason they lost. And what the first thing they should have done was got rid of them. But they didn't.
You're absolutely right. And if you speak to one of those, the sort of Rory Stewart brigade, I know he's no longer an MP, but you take the point, Dan, that those kind of characters, they would, the idea of getting into bed with Nigel Farage would, probably finish them off.
Yeah, this is the thing. So one half could definitely merge. And you know what? Your last caller is really emblematic about, same for me, all of my friends, all of my family. I think Labour currently postponing the elections, for me, is a step too far. I've written to King Charles, Ian. I've asked him to intervene because it's like we're having a communist dictator. You know, you can't just do whatever you want just because you're in power. You know, I'm absolutely shocked by that. And
the only thing that makes that better is that they at least haven't insisted on the cancellation of these. They've asked some councils, given that in 18 months' time we're going to be dismantling your council, what's the point in having an election? I would argue, well, the point of having an election is because you're meant to have an election.
Yeah, and also if you know you're going to get beat, then you choose to postpone, don't you? So you're on the gravy train for another 2 years. Yeah. I personally think that's despicable. And when people look at Starmer and this Labour Party, they won't protect our borders. They won't protect our people. I mean, their first duty, Ian, is the protection of British people, and they refuse to do it. The British public have been crying out for 25, 30 years to control our borders, kick the 2 million out that shouldn't be here, get Britain working, bring common decency back. Where's the law and order? This is not the country I grew up in the 80s. And every day I drive around and I've got bitterness. I'm just bitter looking out the window. I can't believe my country has turned into the way it has. And something drastic needs to be done. And these Labour chumps aren't going to do it. Let's get them out. Reform all the way for me, Ian.
There it is. Daniel, thank you as ever. Daniel in Epsom. This from Richard, who says, good point that. If voting on a feeling, definitely not going to be a thing. Things have to change and people have had enough. Everyone is going to get a shock. The difficulty, I think, Reform have got, and this is... Well, I mean, if they won an outright majority, as Dan just said, then, they'll have 5 years to do whatever they want to do, and I know what they want to do, but what you want to do and what you physically can do to make a tangible change. Voters like Daniel in Epsom want to see action, OK, not on week 1 or even month 1. You might even say, well, by year 2, as you enter your second year in office, we want to see these changes happen. We want to see the direction of travel. And that's the difficulty, isn't it? Is that if you don't see what you're looking for. I mean, Daniel's talking about 2 million people who shouldn't be in the country, no longer being in the country. I could almost, with complete confidence, say that side of things won't look a lot different under Reform UK. Future immigration might change. What is around at the moment, probably, in all probability, won't change. That won't look any different. John in Wallington says, I doubt there will be a pact with the Tories. Reform will win big in May. I think you're bang on about that, John. I think May is going to be a homecoming for Reform UK. And all the focus is on Wales, of course, in particular. I mean, yes, of course, you've got all the council seats, and that's a massive story in itself. But the idea that Reform UK would take over the entirety of Wales and run it with a majority would be one of the greatest game-changing stories of political times, and that would set a trend. And there'd be no way back for many of the other parties. Of course, they'd have to prove themselves in that 3.5 years, but I don't think they'll struggle on that front. 0344 499 1000 is where you'll find us. If you want to drop us a voice note, you can do that too on the same number, and if you want a message, 87222. Right now, the time is 3 o'clock. This is Talk. Let's get the latest news headlines.
This journey of me following the migrants went from sort of 10 in the morning, all around the clock, to late at night, to the point where, on buses, on trains, through streets, at every key point, French military police and the French police, they were there. They were on the bus, taking down notes, taking pictures, but not doing anything to deter the migrants or stop them, just being there. I was sat in the tent and he was showing me through photos of his phone, scrolling through. This was barbaric, horrific stuff. Blokes going through walls in vehicles and then jumping out and shooting everyone. His WhatsApp picture was him with a mask on, with a gun like that.
You're in a tent with this guy?
I'm in a tent with this guy, and actually he's just showing me this stuff. I'm just thinking, this is not the kind of bloke you want to be coming to the UK.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is the Afternoon Empire. It is also the home of common sense, and we have so much to get through. We're talking about the Conservatives closing in on reform. This is just one poll, I get that, as their combined strengths challenges the left. Kemi Badenoch pledges Tory fortunes, and doubts linger over Nigel Farage's team. But will a pact work? Or will it cause too much tension and implode on itself? Thoughts on that? Should the Tories and Reform unite? Also this afternoon, the new chair of the EHRC, that's Mary Ann Stevenson, has warned against portraying migration as a national threat and urged honesty over demonisation, saying leaving the ECHR would be a mistake given its Human Rights Act protections. Well, you might just say she would say that, wouldn't she? We'll come on to that in just a moment. And Brighton and Hove museums have said that Father Christmas is too white and should be decolonised. It also urges parents to challenge colonial gaze, whatever the heck that is, prioritise joy over judgment, and recast Santa as culturally diverse. What a lot of old balls, I think we can all agree. We'll have more on that story as well. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. Let's go for some comment from you. This comes in from Gary in Belfast. I am, as some people like to call, far right and support reform. I'd like to see them joining together, as I think Kemi is getting better, as long as the policies about immigration was going to stay the same as reform's plans, says Gary. I think a few people are in that particular department too. Brad in Cambridge, as an ex-member of the Conservative Party and now a member of Reform, I'm quite relaxed about a coalition between the two. It could well be the only way to prevent a coalition of the evil left. They would need to rid themselves of a few con-socialists, though, says Brad, which is the point that Daniel made just before the news. So let's move into this story then. Kemi Badenoch might be having a bit of a surge. Oh, no, sorry. We'll come back to that in a sec, as I was just saying. This is the new EHRC chief, Mary Ann Stevenson, who's warned against portraying migration as a risk to Britain. As I said, she's ordered or urged an end to the demonisation of immigration. This is her first major intervention. She also said leaving the European Convention on Human Rights would be a bit of a mistake. Let's have a listen to what she said.
The demonisation of migrants, the creating this idea that migration causes, huge risks for the country, can make the lives not just of migrants to the UK, but of ethnic minority UK citizens very, very difficult. I think leaving the European Convention is a mistake. It weakens the rights that all of us depend on.
I don't want to be too judgmental. I don't know Marianne Stevenson, but I'm listening to what she's saying and I'm looking at how she's saying this. And frankly, she encapsulates absolutely everything that is wrong with our current society at every level. And it's not a personal thing. It is just, I cannot fathom how these organisations and the people that are in them, they're nicely staffed in terms of numbers, how they even get into the public debate any longer. Let's speak to Annunziata Rees-Mogg on this, Head of Communications for Popular Conservatism and a former MEP. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Annunziata, but I'm sure you could probably concur a little bit with what I just said there.
Ian, I've rarely agreed with you more. You're absolutely spot on that these quangos are ridiculously powerful. They have Labour lobbies appointed to lead them. Marianne Stevenson has previously called for Keir Starmer to scrap saying smash the gangs because that was an offensive line to take. She's asked for wealth taxes. She is a complete Labour lovey who is a do-gooder who's completely misguided. And she calls for honesty. And I think that is the one point in her interview that I agreed with her on. We do want honesty in this debate. We want to know who's coming here, what crimes they're committing. Maybe it's none, but we should know exactly who they are, what they're doing, and we should be able to get rid of them again. At the moment, we have no idea who's here. We have no idea even how many people are here illegally. And we need to have an honest debate about the problems it is causing. And she might turn out to be right, that all these lovely immigrants are a great benefit to our country and we should be extremely nice to them despite the fact they broke the law coming into our country illegally in the first place. However, we might discover that they genuinely do pose a risk. We know of lots and lots of examples where people have been attacked, raped, even killed, and yet we don't know who they are. That's the debate we have to have.
Absolutely right. And I'm just going to draw back onto something I said to a previous guest on this. When you first read a story about the EHRC, which sort of is suspiciously named to sound a little bit like the ECHR, and therefore I thought I'd missed something in my political knowledge, which is, not bad, frankly. I'd go on Mastermind as a specialist subject and all of that. I thought, the EHRC, what decade was this for? Was this something from the 40s or the 50s? And, of course, it wasn't. This was a Blair Quango that was set up in 2006, stuffed full of sizzling lefties. 200 people work there. Goodness knows what the heck they do all day. And they've got an annual budget of the thick end of £20 million. If ever there was a classic, indeed concrete example of bureaucracy we don't need, then this is absolutely right in the bullseye territory.
Absolutely. And what they're supposed to do, they don't even do. That after the Court of Appeal judgment that, women are women earlier this year, they were meant to issue guidance on how people should implement that. They still haven't. That everyone has been left in limbo, not knowing whether you need single-sex spaces or whether everything should still be used for two different genders or what should be done. And if it can't do what it's meant to do, it shouldn't exist. But what it is meant to do should be decided by democratically elected politicians, not, as you say, lots of Labour lovies who sit around navel-gazing and making themselves feel good about policies that don't work.
Absolutely. And the other aspect of this, where she talks about urging the end of demonisation of immigration, suggesting that portraying migration as a risk is wrong. And in fact, I think we need to be more honest about it. We need to... Immigration, it's a very serious business. Governments have an absolute duty, a democratic duty, a legal duty to protect its borders. That's not controversial. It's not controversial to be angry that since Keir Starmer came to power, nearly 65,000 people have come across the English Channel. He's only been in power half an hour, for goodness sake. 65,000 people have rowed across the English Channel and made their way into the UK when they're now given board and lodgings to stay here pending all manner of very lengthy legal arguments that have to take place. We should rightly be a little angry about that. Doesn't mean to say we hate immigrants. It doesn't mean to say that we think every immigrant is a criminal. Nothing like it. That's an anti-intellectual position that she's putting forward. This is about our borders. It's about securing our borders. And, of course, there's a slightly inconvenient matter of about £6 million a day it costs our own economy in order to house these people.
You're absolutely right. That it's £5 billion a year that we don't have. But it's the government that's caused this problem. That no one had an issue with immigration until it was completely out of control, until we didn't know who was coming here, who was overstaying as well. That is another large issue, probably dwarfing the numbers who come over on small boats. But it is the failure of government to keep our country secure that has caused the fear that is absolutely real across the country of not knowing who is coming.
Yeah. While you're with us, Nunziata, it's worth just getting a quick word on this, if you would. Interesting intervention from the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, today, defying Keir Starmer's position and suggesting Britain should join a customs union with Europe. A poll shows that 8 out of 10 Labour voters would support the move. I mean, this is very much somebody gearing up for the big job, isn't it?
Well, I think everyone knows that Keir Starmer's leadership is a dead man walking, that it's not going to last, and they're all lining up to get their factions to support them to take the next job. That we know there are other people in the frame, such as Angela Rayner, despite her sojourn currently on the back benches. I think Wes Streeting has done a great job in pretending he doesn't want the job. And we all see straight through it.
Yeah, 100%. And Nunziata, thank you, as ever, for your time. Head of Communications for Popular Conservatives and former MEP Nunziata Rees-Mogg with her thoughts. And, in fact, the more you think about the horrendous and offensive way in which Mary-Ann Stevenson has framed the immigration argument, I believe, and this is the problem that you have, this is the problem that politics have, I don't think Mary-Ann Stevenson, who's the new head of the EHRC, suddenly woke up this morning and thought, I'm going to, poke the nest a little bit, stir things up. She genuinely believes this old guff, and she believes she's on the side of right. And that's always been, it's forever been the problem with left-wing thinking, is that people in that department genuinely believe that they are speaking not just their own opinion, but almost the word of God. They believe they're speaking from a moral position that is therefore unchallengeable. And anyone who wishes to, in any shape or form, throw in a caveat or a question is somehow some kind of demon, in this case, and, hates immigrants, demonising immigrants, etc. Her words. And this is and this is a quango, by the way. It's not some official global body. This was just some appointed outfit that was put there by Blair & Co. back in 2006, which, is set out to, I'm just looking at its blurb here, promotion and enforcement of equality and non-discrimination laws. Well, that's why we have a legal system, right? I mean, we need this 200 staffed body with 20 million quid in their back pocket. And there's loads of these these things are flipping everywhere. When you look into the quango world, these things are all over the place. It's just hundreds of millions of pounds just being dished out to these kind of talking heads who speak on behalf of virtually no one you ever met in real life. Let's go to Nigel down in London. Reference our first question, Nigel. Should the Tories and Reform unite? Good afternoon to you.
I think that the Tory party is a bit like a stale sausage roll there. No one wants them. And I think that in reality that the only way that the Tories or Reform would be in government were if they were to unite. Because in reality, if Reform, I think I've got 5 MPs, to try and get 350 plus is one hell of an achievement. I think that's going to be an impossibility. I mean, you've got to bear in mind, of course, that Labour can link up with the Lib Dems. Yep. And I think that, from my point of view, the difficulty that Reform have is I'm sorry to say, they seem to be a bit of a one-trick pony. It's immigration, 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 but they don't mention much about the economy, and which is also particularly important.
Very important. I mean, they would... I'm sure if Nigel Farage was sitting here now, Nigel, he'd say, no, I've talked about it 2,000 times in the last 2 years. Maybe they have, but you're right. That idea that... And arguably this will come to fruition over the next year or so, particularly as we approach the local elections. But people need to have a visual sense of reform's economic direction in the same way they have a visual sense of their immigration policy.
Absolutely correct. Reform have banged on about illegal immigration, which is important. We all accept that illegal immigration is not welcome, but we all accept that legal immigration is welcome. But they need to also conduct a sense of policies about the economy, because the economy at the moment is, as far as I'm concerned, is collapsing. Labour's chief, was it the one from the Labour Party, saying, "Oh, well, we're putting more money in people's pockets." That's absolute nonsense. The cost of living is rising, everything's going up, and this country, whether it's Labour or Tory, have had this terrible, terrible policy of not encouraging growth, not encouraging entrepreneurship, and if you do well, they don't like it and they penalise you for it.
Where do you think it's likely to go then? Do you think there's, I mean, this idea that neither party can win on their own suggests that something's got to happen between the two?
Well, that's the only avenue of success, is if they both join together and both remove their sort of, well, particularly the Tories, remove their sort of ancestry of nonsense and get on to dealing with some proper, strong policies and stop blaming previous parties for their own failures. Let's not forget, they had 14 years of enjoyment, and 14 years they squandered. Boris came along, he got an 81 plastic majority, I think it was. It was all squandered. What did Rishi Sunak do that was impressive? Nothing.
No. And that's I think that's the danger that the main parties, let's call them that, Labour, the Tories, have got, because they have mostly governed from a position of complacency, because there's a sort of a status quo. There's certain things they don't get involved with, or just leave that as it is. It's the way it's always been. It probably works best. And yeah, you could tinker around the edges, but that's too much hassle, probably quite expensive, so we won't bother. And it's that needing to bother, I think, that's going to get the next government elected, someone who's going to say, actually, the old template is now well and truly dead. On that point, Nigel, thank you very much indeed. Happy Christmas. 0344 499 1000. That's where you'll find us. Back with more of your comments coming next on Talk.
You can't try and snipe at the Conservatives for things that weren't our fault.
Oh, I mean, I
This
haven't
is
got
not one.
time. Don't tell your big mate Donald Trump to tell his big mate Vladimir Putin to stop killing people, then we can solve that problem like that.
Won't be surprised to know I disagree.
Why? Why do you disagree, though? Why do you want our young people left on the scrap heap? The court's time being wasted, laying down a ruling on what is a woman. You and I have been speaking for far too many years about
And
this.
actually, you know, I'm very grateful to you too, because you have always covered this topic.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk at Christmas, and there's lots going on, including Petri Hoskin, who's going to be here at 4 o'clock this afternoon, Alex Phillips tonight at 7, and Duncan Barks is on the schedule tonight at 10. Do not be missing any of that right here at the home of Common Sense for Christmas on Talk. Mark is in Lincolnshire. What have you got for us, Mark? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. You all
Hiya.
right?
Yeah, good. What's going on?
Happy Christmas, by the way, I guess.
And you too. Is it happy or is it merry? We've been having a slight debate in the office about... I said to somebody... I said Happy Christmas to somebody. They said Merry Christmas back. And then Finn, our producer, intervened and said, no, it's definitely merry. It's never happy.
No, I mean, I always use Happy Christmas.
Yeah, I say
think
Happy
Merry
Christmas, yeah.
I would prefer it to be Happy Christmas, Merry New Year, because most people are getting merry on New Year's Eve, aren't they?
That's very true, yes.
You know.
Either way will do for us.
Well, I was going to ask you, actually, a quick question for you, really quick. Are you looking forward to Santa coming and emptying his sack this year?
Yes, definitely, yes. I've made all the correct... Stop it. I've made all the provisions for it, Mark.
Yeah, he only comes once a year, you know, Ian.
Indeed, yes. So he's not alone in that,
Sorry,
is he? Fire away.
Anyway, I'm pleased I've come off the back of that last caller, because I want to quickly address something he said. He mentioned something which I believe is the reason why this country is screwed.
Go on.
He said, we all agree illegal migration needs to be stopped and stamped out and blah, blah. But we all agree that legal migration is absolutely fine. That's what he said, right? And this is the reason why this country is screwed. Because, and it's also actually the reason why we will end up with a civil war. It won't be the left that particularly cause it. It'll be the division within the right that causes civil war.
Okay.
It's going to end up being essentially civic nationalists and ethnic nationalists, because the chap that was on the phone there, he's very much a civic nationalist, very much a Tory voter. You know, he, as he said, you know, he sees legal immigration as absolutely fine. So the dilemma for him is, what if they make all illegal migration legal?
What if they make all illegal migration?
Sorry?
So illegal migration, make it legal?
Yeah, essentially, which is what Labour are doing at the minute.
Yeah.
They're on about the safe and legal routes.
Yeah, yeah.
So is he then happy with that?
So do we have, and this is the deal, do we become the only country in the world that has zero immigration policy?
Well, apparently. I mean, that's kind of what we have now, isn't it? I mean...
Well, we have when I say an immigration policy, the policy is meant to be, so something kicks off in Ukraine, a load of people need somewhere to go, so we, along with all the other countries, say, yep, we will be part of that quota system where we'll try and help people. So, you know, Jews escaping Nazi Germany, the most famous of examples. That's what we're meant to be. Would you be in favour of getting rid of all of that?
In essence, yes. I believe that we need a complete clear out in this country. You know,
of people who shouldn't be here.
Yeah, you've got the visa overstayers. You've got the Boris wave all need to go, whoever they are, whatever purpose they came for. The reality is, never in political history has it ever been mandated to bring people here. Quite the opposite.
Well, it's been a kind of pick and choose thing, isn't it? It's been, I mean, when the Boris wave was meant to have started with good intention, when they talked about getting people of certain skill levels, and of course it wasn't people with certain skill levels that came in bulk, it was people very low skilled levels that came, and the argument was, you know, certainly care homes seems to be the big one, doesn't it? We need people to man the care homes.
Yeah, so you bring people in who don't care for the people that they're supposed to be caring for. We've seen countless cases of that. You know, elder abuse and things like this that have happened as a result. You know, language barrier issues. You know, bringing people in who maybe don't necessarily have a full grasp of English to look after the elderly, who themselves are going to have potentially language issues themselves, even though obviously they're probably going to be English, but they may still have language issues just purely because of their age.
Absolutely, and that seems to get a free pass when it's a completely crucial aspect, particularly in the care industry, of course, where, you know, having a full command of the local language is it's not just desirable, it's absolutely flipping crucial that you do by definition of what you're doing.
I mean, I did care work for about 8 years when I first left school. I've got quite a bit of experience in it, I guess. And it was often quite difficult to communicate with residents in care homes. You know, as I say, depending on the conditions that they're suffering with.
Yeah, I was going to say, so it becomes even more of an issue if you don't fully speak the language and all the kind of nuances that go with it. But I guess, you know, the argument for the people that are more pro-immigration is that if you got rid of, or if you had a complete stop on any of those people coming to this country, so no one ever came here again, or let's say for the next 10 years, no one ever came here again. We then found all the overstayers and we were able to expel them. We found also, on a separate issue, but nonetheless it's in this debate, foreign criminals. We got rid of all of those people as well that are, you know, serving time at our expense. If you did all of that and got rid of everyone, we would then, half an hour later, be crying out for personnel to come and work in certain sectors. Is that true or false?
You may have some issues with some sectors, yes. However, the crux of migration can no longer be used. Government has to be forced to invest in its own people to fill these roles. However painful a short-term thing may be, while you're doing that, we have to go through that. Otherwise, what you're basically subscribing to is non-stop, forever immigration.
Yeah.
Infinite immigration, forever and ever.
But isn't the argument that comes forth from people like the woman from the Equality and Human Rights Department that we were just hearing from, isn't her point that we will always need there's always a circular thing where you have to keep importing people for certain jobs?
Yeah, well, that's a very left-wing position. It is. Yeah,
I'm interested because we've never. You and I, Mark, have never lived in a world where this wasn't the case. It might not have been the case to the same extent. So I just wonder, what does that world look like if we had no immigration at all? I can see the seductive arguments behind it, but is the reality different from the likes of you and I, or what we'd like to see?
Well, over time and what have you, we would end up with a much safer society, a much more, as the buzzword they like to use, cohesive society.
Yeah.
And I'm not necessarily talking about getting rid of people that came in the 60s, 70s and 80s and their offspring. I'm talking about people that have been coming here since essentially, 2000 plus.
I absolutely get that. But because see, the only way you would, and I've thought long and hard about it. We've done a couple of shows on this before, Mark, as I'm sure you're aware. And I remember once carving out a bit of I don't know if it was it wasn't an argument, it was a question or a point that this whole area, because the other thing we talk about a lot are how many people are on benefits and welfare in this country. You would have to then come to a position, if it's true, that without regular immigration in things like the care sector, and we stop that, we'd have to then compel people in this country to work in the care sector. So you'd have to have some kind of trade-off and say, right, there's no benefits going to anyone unless you take this job. Yeah, is that doable? Bearing in mind the care sector is, as you know from your own experience, it's not exactly the kind of world you want to force somebody to work in.
And perhaps not, but we do have plenty of unemployed that, you know, I can remember a time where you had to do some kind of productive work in order to get benefits. I mean, I got into the care sector through the YTS scheme, for example.
Wow.
You know.
Was that 20 odd quid a week, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a pittance. But, you know, it served me well for those years, and I could do it when I was at uni as well to earn a bit extra money.
And you could go out for a whole weekend on 20 quid a week, so that's the thing. Things have changed somewhat, indeed.
Yeah, they have. I mean, I just think that, you know, unless we drastically tackle the issue of remigration, we're never going to get anywhere.
I absolutely agree with that, and I don't know why it should be controversial. You know, if obviously there is an understanding that, you know, we need X amount of people in certain sectors, I also understand that. We're not stupid, but over-migrating a country, which is clearly what we've done, is the problem. Listen, I've got to move, Mark, for no other reason than we've hit the clock. Have a cracking Christmas, whether it's happy or merry. Thank you to Mark in Lincolnshire, 0344 499 1000. 2:30, this is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, trying to finish off a Christmas chocolate before our next section. That's the trouble, isn't it? When it's just our last day of before Christmas, and then after Christmas, we're doing the breakfast show for 4 days. That's like a week today. But people bring in chocolate, like me, for example. I brought in loads of chocolate today. And it's always been the case in doing this job. The one person, and maybe rightly so, that can never enjoy like a late night pizza or a box of chocolates is the person who's on air. And you look through the glass, and as I look through the glass, there's a kind of collection of chocolate faces out there. And I'm talking about Finn and Luke and Matt, frankly. He'll be on the jabs at this rate by about 4 o'clock. He's trousered so much of the stuff. There's Faith, who actually is putting some of it in her bag. Yes, we saw her. And the only person that can't get a good old handful of the confectionery is the poor person on air, because you have to speak. So you get like 2 minutes to enjoy the moment. And then Phil Dave walks in and just does a smash and grab, frankly. He's just literally stolen our chocolate. Unbelievable. This is meant to be the spirit of Christmas, is what we're working with here. Let's move then to this story, the Brighton and Hove story. What are they doing over there? The museums that say Father Christmas should be decolonized, not too white, scrap the naughty list, work alongside the elves as equals, and add a Mother Christmas too. Don't we already have one of those? At this rate, everyone's reaction to politically correct Santa is going to sound like this.
Don't tell him what you want. He's a liar. Let the kid talk. You disgust me. How can you live with yourself? Just cool it, Zippy. You sit on a throne of lies.
Look, I'm not kidding.
You're a fake.
I'm a fake?
Yes.
How'd you like to be dead?
Well, there's a bit of Elf. You can't knock a bit of that at Christmas time. Let's speak with James Esses, free speech advocate. James, good afternoon to you.
Afternoon, Ian.
Always nice to speak. Listen, when these stories come around, there is a bit of me that thinks, you know, you've got like a group of people sitting, in this case, on a committee in a museum who thinks, how can we get people like me and you to get angry and chat about stuff? We don't really mean any of this old guff, but we'll just come up with something outrageous and see what happens. You know, are they just throwing us a bone over there? What do you think?
Well, I was hoping for my first ever woke-free Christmas, but it doesn't seem it's going to be this year. I certainly hope that your hypothesis is correct, because otherwise I think I'd have to diagnose the individuals responsible for this with collective madness. I mean, it's so depressing, but it's also so pathetic.
Yeah.
And there's so much irony in this as well. Actually, I noticed that as I read through the document. I mean, they say that, you know, Santa Claus is Western, and this is a bad thing. Well, if they look at where he resides, he's in the North Pole. I mean, you couldn't get less Western if you tried.
That's very true.
You know, but jokes aside, I mean, it's funny because they criticize him for being what they say is just a white, non-disabled man. I mean, that's, you know, the reduction of things to nothing more than meaningless labels. But it's interesting because they're happy to criticize those demographics that they seem to have a disliking to. So, for example, they also criticize Santa Claus for being old. Now, that sounds pretty ageist.
That's quite ageist, isn't it? That's an outrage.
Yeah. So, you know, it's one rule for one and another for another. They just, this is the problem with the DEI brigade, because they hate old white men, and they don't mind if they discriminate against people who happen to fall into that category.
Yeah, because I mean, the fact they're white, because they do make the point that apparently that Father Christmas should be decolonised. I mean, I don't know what his colonisation offences actually are. I don't think giving out presents to every country in the world, even places he's not from, is the very antithesis of, you know, what's being suggested here. You know, this is a man of clear benevolence. This is a guy that caters for kids regardless of creed or colour, regardless of where they live. It's not just a Western thing. He goes all over the place. I know this because I've seen the map.
Well, you say this, Ian, but to be fair, Santa Claus has never attended unconscious bias training. So,
yeah,
you know, that could be where he's falling down. But it's interesting because what this essentially does, and the label of decolonisation, but essentially it dilutes morals and principles that we respect here in the Western world and in British culture. And if anything, that's only going to make people's lives and parents' lives more difficult. I mean, ask parents, they'll tell you that Christmas time is often the one time of the year where the kids are actually properly well behaved, and it's because they have to if they want to get a decent present out of it. And it suggests, and it suggests in this document that indigenous notions of what's good and bad are different to what we feel. But I mean, on that point, if you ask the people in Britain how they feel about the cultural shift and the significantly changing demographics in this country through mass immigration, they would tell you actually they probably don't like shifts in behaviour over time. So I don't know on what basis they can suggest that indigenous notions of what's good and bad are any better than what we consider to be good and bad here in Britain.
And the other point in this crazy story, James, is they're talking about adding in a Mother Christmas. Now, there's always been a Mrs. Claus hanging around the scene, hasn't there? I've never quite known what she does. I don't know whether, you know, she arrived on the scene via an app or what happened. But there's, you know, there's always a Mrs. Christmas in most of the Christmas stories.
Exactly. But unfortunately, there is this narrative that because they have different roles, you know, and because he's the one out there delivering presents and that everyone talks about, that's in some ways unfair. You know, rather than recognizing the fact, as we should do with any nuclear family, that the husband and the wife play roles, both of which can be equally valid. They don't have to necessarily have the same title. It's quite a regressive way of looking at things, actually. But yes, they don't just want to decolonize, they want to tackle the patriarchy. They also seem to want to tackle entrepreneurs and people who run businesses, because one of their suggestions is that Santa Claus should be shown to be working on the factory line too with the rest of the elves. You know, for what reason? You know, we live in a capitalist society. At the end of the day, entrepreneurs, employers drive business and growth in the economy, they don't necessarily need to be doing the exact same job as everyone else, even in the lower rungs of the company. That's not how life works.
Of course. And many of those elves, I'm sure, went on to other jobs, you know, and started their own businesses elsewhere too. So, you know, we should be a big round of applause for the elf. I mean, the elves are equal, and some of them go on to sort of, you know, Dragon's Den and beyond territory. Listen, James, thank you for coming on with us. Really appreciate that. James S. is free speech advocate. And, of course, the other thing about the Brighton and Hove museums is it says here Brighton and Hove museums. Well, what's the S on that? Is it all museums in Brighton and Hove, Finn? Or is it a museum in Brighton and Hove? Or is it the collective of the Brighton and Hove Museum? I'm sure there's a lot of old museums down there. But nonetheless, decolonising Father Christmas is up there. I can't think of a character that is more kind of socially diverse as Father Christmas. He might be an old white bloke. I don't think the last time I looked, even by the standards of the United Nations, I don't think that's quite a criminal offence. I don't think that's penciled in until 2028. But he's all over the show, as I mentioned. I mean, the idea that... And the Mother Christmas thing, I mean, think of all the films you've seen. Think of all the films you've seen. When I was about 16, I remember a mate of mine gave me an old dusty VHS copy of a film called Pull My Sleigh, and there was definitely a Mother Christmas in that, so I can count for the fact that I've been witness to it. 0344 499 1000. Loads going on at this end, including, of course, the tourism reform. I mean, it's back to the age-old question of whether there should be a pact between these two organisations. Political parties, however you want to look at them. But it's been given a bit of new resonance with some opinion polling that's showing Kemi Badenoch growing in popularity and a slight levelling out for reform. It was just one poll, and as Gwaine Towler said to us earlier, subsequent polls have said the very opposite to that. So who knows? But it seems that Badenoch's star is rising. Can she keep that momentum going through the next year? She's going to need it for those May local elections. And Santa, of course. Let's go to Carl in Liverpool on the issue of Santa. What are you making of it, Carl? Good afternoon to you.
Happy Christmas, Ian. Good afternoon.
Happy Christmas to you too.
I can't believe we're having a great... Earlier on, you were talking to Mark about re-immigration and how immigration's destroying the country and how bad it is and stuff. And now we're talking about a fictitious character for a holiday.
Yeah.
And it was
very real character, I should say.
Yeah, it's being brought about for children, and we've got adults deciding whether or not he's woke enough. I said this a long time ago. I did say this a long time ago on Talk that next will be Christmas, you know, and this is what they're going for. And surely to follow, it will be Easter. You know, we'll have all these things. I think it's just pathetic. The country's on its knees at the moment, Ian. We're crying out for help. And rather than sort the problems out, as fantastic as your show is, we are now talking about Santa Claus not being woke enough. And it is just absolutely disgusting that...
This is where we've ended up.
Exactly. And we've got a bunch of adults that are trying to change this. And these adults should just shut up, sit in a room somewhere and have a strong word with themselves. Because what they're trying to do is change the fabric of every holiday that comes that is traditionally Christian.
Is it not a hate crime? Is there a hate crime going on here? You know, we live in a country where you can jail people for many months for things they said. Now, if this lot are literally saying that Santa's too white, I would argue there's a kind of slight racist component in this as well.
Yeah, most definitely, of course. Yeah, of course, if that's the wording that they've used and the terms that they've... I just think it's pathetic, Ian. It's a pathetic shout for attention, you know? For these woke lunatics to just stick their nose on every aspect of what happens in this country. And it's got to stop. You know, we need to end this stupidity and these morons, these left-leaning woke idiots.
Yeah.
When reform get in, these people need to just stand in line and look at the country get better.
And look for another job.
Of course.
Love it.
But if I may, you know, it's got to stop, the whole thing. There's more important things going on in this country than for the British population to be thinking, well, Santa's not woke enough now, we need to change that.
Indeed. Carl.
It's got to stop.
I love it. Thank you very much. Love the annoyance over Christmas from Carl in Liverpool. What about the Grinch, though? Is the Grinch too green? I don't know about you, but I'm really down on the Green people. Have you noticed how many? When we talk about the Channel migrants crossing, nobody ever talks about the Grinch crossings, do they? They come via the North Sea, and there's loads of them, these green gits, coming over every single day. Green face, get out! And you say that and nothing happens, and they're just allowed in and they're given accommodation. And you what, Matt? Yeah, I could get in trouble for saying that, but nobody blinks. The Green people, they haven't even got the same size brain as the rest of us. Did you know that? Yeah, these people are freaks. They're not even fully human as far as I'm concerned, and they're a little bit hairy as well. No one likes a hairy one, do they? Let's be honest. Small hearts as well. You notice that if you follow the Grinch kind of biology, they haven't got a normal heart like anybody else. Their brain doesn't function properly. They've got weird hands as well. What's those hands about? That's like they haven't fully developed or something, like something from the... Yeah, what are they doing with those hands? Wear a funny hat every now and again. I hate green people. They disgust me, you filthy bunch of merchants. Coming over here, nicking our jobs. Down with the Grinches. That's going to be the big campaign for 2026. This is Grace down in London. I'm sure loves green people. Grace, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. It strikes me that there's far more wealth coming to wealthy countries like ours from developing countries than is given in aid. So we actually still have a net transfer of wealth coming to countries like ours. And while we hear about how it's really tragic that there are some people in our country who need food banks, there are some people elsewhere in our world who literally have no food, who are literally starving. And so why is it that there are some people moaning about the pigmentation of Father Christmas? If you care about social justice, if you care about the impact that the history of colonialism has had, why are we not talking about resolving the current issues in our world? Why are we trying to make a fuss about a fictional character? It's absurd
Fictional?
to me.
How dare you? Fictional?
Sorry.
What are you talking about?
I mean, your previous caller mentioned Christian festivals, and you might argue that Father Christmas is not crucial to the Christian aspect of Christmas, but St. Nicholas, who I'm afraid himself wasn't white, he would have been pale brown in colour since he was in Turkey, but I don't think it really matters what colour Father Christmas is, and people
I thought, wasn't Father Christmas one of the wise men?
Father Christmas is based on St. Nicholas. But
Isn't he the one with the frankincense on the camel? Is that not him?
No,
I got that.
But the wise men, or rather the magi...
Or was it the one with the ark and the animals, two of each one? Was that him?
It was Noah who built the ark.
Noah. I was thinking it was Santa.
Either way,
like
none of
one
these
syllable name thing.
None of these people would have been Caucasian, but it really doesn't matter, frankly. I mean, I think if people want to think about the meaning of Christmas, we could talk about how the concept of Father Christmas encourages generosity, which is great, but by contrast, Jesus was a real human being. And sometimes people compare Jesus and Father Christmas, or God and Father Christmas, but adults don't take up believing in Father Christmas. They don't begin believing in Father Christmas when they're adults, whereas quite a lot of people realise, as adults, that there is rational reasoning for believing in God, so that comparison that comes up often is fallacious. But I think there is this presumption in our society, because people said that Father Christmas is too judgmental. People are so furious.
But he's not judgmental, is he?
Anyone
he dishes out the gifts.
But it's ironic because they're judging him by saying he's too white and colonial.
There is the naughty list as well, of course.
But do they not want the children to be nice rather than naughty? Wouldn't that make
kids
a
like
better
my
world?
little boy went on and off that list yesterday many, many times. He started off on it, and then he was off it, and then back on again.
It's this kind of imperative we have in our society that I see all the time, where people are very angry if someone has an opinion on their behaviour. Now, you could just ignore someone else's opinion on your behaviour, but actually you aren't a good person on the basis of, just ignore... The point of Jesus coming, if you do believe in Christianity, is that we're all naughty, but we're offered salvation. And so people getting all angry about thinking that Father Christmas might be judgmental is not really helping make the world a better place. Let's talk about how we actually could make the world a better place.
Can I ask you a very fundamental and obvious Christian question, Grace? And to my shame, I can't answer this. Jesus was crucified. He returned. And whatever phrase somebody wants to use, became our saviour, and all that goes with the Christian story. What then happened to Jesus?
Ultimately, he just ascended again. He spent about 40 days with his disciples mostly, giving them further teaching and showing that he had actually come back to life. And one of the things that's recounted is that he cooks some fish and eats some fish with them on the beach. But then after a while, he just ascends back up. And then the disciples go around and share his message with the world.
So there is no... yeah, I mean, I sort of know the answer to this bit. There's no burial place where you can say that is where Jesus was buried. And that is partly the point, I suppose, is it? It's meant to require a kind of spiritual tug to believe, surely.
Yeah, well, I mean, were it the case that there were a burial place, then his followers would have made it, they would have venerated it, and it would have been a pilgrimage site, but that didn't happen, because although there are plenty of accounts of Jesus existing, there isn't actually a burial site.
Yeah. No, I asked that question in genuine innocence, because what you've just told me is kind of where I was at in the story, but I thought, hang on, is there something... I haven't done Bible studies since I was at Sunday school, and that was when I was about 6, so we're talking like, 30 years ago now. But I get it. Grace, thank you very much. It's not funny. Grace, thank you very much indeed, and happy Christmas, or is it Merry Christmas? I can't remember which one. That's Grace down in London. And of course, I think what should fundamentally, it's worth just stressing that right now we are 2 days before Santa and elves are preparing the sleighs ready to go off on that magical journey. And Santa will be probably slightly amused that there is a charitable organisation, or whatever the heck they are, the Museum Foundation in Brighton, who are apparently picking apart his characteristics. When every little boy and girl listening to this now, every mum and dad, every nan and granddad, every cousin, not the one you don't like, but most cousins, would all concur that actually, fundamentally, this is a very loving, generous man who's not going to be worried about his image. He's a jolly character with a healthy tummy, a beautiful beard, lovely cherubic cheeks, and ready to go on that journey around the globe to deliver presents right across, regardless of creed or colour. And this is going to be the busiest man anywhere in the world. Forget how hard politicians work. Forget how hard you've grafted this year. No one is going to be giving it large, quite like Santa, in the next 2 days. So I think we should thank Father Christmas for the brilliant work he's about to do in the next 2 days, right here on planet Earth. This is Talk.
You can't try and snipe at the Conservatives for things that weren't our fault.
Oh, I mean, I haven't got time. Don't tell your big mate Donald Trump to tell his big mate Vladimir Putin to stop killing people, then we can solve that problem like that.
Won't be surprised to know I disagree.
Why do you disagree, though? Why do you want our young people left on the scrap heap? The court's time being wasted, laying down a ruling on what is a woman. You and I have been speaking for far too many years about this.
And actually, I'm very grateful to you too, because you have always covered this topic.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This from Amanda, who says, who are these deranged people who criticise Father Christmas? They need serious help. Where are the men in white coats, she says. Bang on, Amanda. Where are they when you need them? Before we carry on and talk to Kevin in Wiltshire, it's the Voice of Doom, day 5. It's the mystery voice. It's going to have a little bit of rest over Christmas, so this is the last day to try to do your best to identify who is this.
Going to be community relations.
Quite a tricky one, ish. They're all a bit tricky, but it's sort of mid, as my kid would say. Here it is again.
Going to be community relations.
Yes. Who's that? 87222. 87222. If somebody gets it correct, we obviously reveal all. That'll be after the news headlines at 3. If not, it rolls over till, 2026. Can you even believe it? Here it is one more time.
Going to be community relations.
87222. Kevin in Wiltshire. What have you got for us, Kevin?
Good afternoon, Ian.
Afternoon.
I'm one of the few people, I think, that I can realistically see Reform and Conservatives having to work together, and I actively want them to work together. I think it's the only way. I mean, this Starmer's got his coalition of the willing in Europe, and I think he'll have the coalition of nutters all working against Reform. and you'll have Labour, the Greens, the Lib Dems, and then the other outfit that want to join up, because I think there's a good 20 or 30% of the electorate. Reform are basically, in my opinion, traditional Conservatives, and that is all it is, traditional Conservative values. And there's a lot of traditional Conservatives who can't bring themselves to actually vote for the word Reform, because all it is tarnished as far right racist.
I mean, if you think about the people of note, and when I say note, I mean because of their profile, David Cameron, John Major, you could Theresa May, people like that. They wouldn't vote for Nigel Farage if he was on fire. You know, these people could not bring themselves together. So what is it that separates them so crucially?
I just think he says what the country feels, and they feel as though they're out of touch with it. Basically, I think a lot of the Conservative Party who were there, and the reason that they were voted out, a lot of those front bench immediate people you think of, the weasels really have been gone. The Badnut's got quite a nice little thing going at the moment. She's building up in the polls. She's got reasonable people around her, and the lefty, wokey liberals in amongst her party have cut the red down and shut up.
Could you vote for her?
I've always voted Conservative till the last election and voted Reform, and I can see myself voting for her again. The problem with Reform is Farage, is the only guy. He wouldn't move over for anybody else, but I do believe there's an awful lot of people there who could do a damn good job working with the Conservatives.
Is it what Nigel Farage says, or is it how he says it?
I think it's a combination of both. He sticks in the throat of a lot of people, and they simply won't vote for him for who he is and what he says. What he says is fundamentally correct, but sometimes it's just the way he says it and the way he comes across. He's no better sometimes than some of the bad Conservatives he's got rid of.
Look, listen, I mean, people will take their pick at the ballot box, of course, but I do think that the Farage thing isn't just about immigration. I think there is a genuine and general sense that common sense has gone out of the window. We don't hear politicians getting angry about stuff they should get angry about. We don't hear anything like that. Listen, Kevin, I've got to stop there for time, but thank you for that. Kevin in Wiltshire, who could vote Tory again, but I think that's pending Kemi Badenoch really upping her game. She's certainly turned a bit of a corner. Also after the news, will we have a winner to the Voice of Doom? Have a listen to the voice.
Going to be community relations.
If you think you know who that is, it's 87222. Let's get the news headlines. The time now is 3 o'clock.
This journey of me following the migrants went from sort of 10 in the morning, all around the clock, to late at night, to the point where, on buses, on trains, through streets, at every key point, French military police and the French police, they were there. They were on the bus, taking down notes, taking pictures, but not doing anything to deter the migrants or stop them, just being there. I was sat in the tent and he was showing me through photos of his phone, scrolling through. This was barbaric, horrific stuff. Blokes going through walls in vehicles and then jumping out and shooting everyone. His WhatsApp picture was him with a mask on, with a gun like that.
You're in a tent with this guy?
I'm in a tent with this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is our last 1 o'clock show of the year. Lots to go through. We're talking about the Tories and Reform uniting. Would you support that idea? Kemi Badenoch rising a tad, certainly according to one recent poll. There are suggestions that Nigel Farage is kind of plateauing. But it is the one poll, because the other polls that followed actually put him in a rather more advantageous position. But would you support the idea of Tories and Reform getting it together? And if you're a disgruntled Tory who went to Reform, how do you feel about your old gang getting back together again? Thoughts on that? We're also discussing Mary Ann Stevenson. She's the new chair of the it's called the Equality and Human Rights Commission. She's warned against portraying migration as a national threat. She's urging honesty over demonisation. This is a classic case of somebody who's paid too much money for a quango we do not even need, and is pretty much stating a claim that I don't think most people would define this discussion by. But it didn't let the EHRC chair stop. We'll have more on that. And we're talking about the demonisation of Father Christmas as well. Apparently he's too white and should be decolonised. This is the Brighton and Hove Museums who've urged parents to challenge the colonial gaze, prioritise joy over judgment, and recast Santa as being more culturally diverse. I would suggest a man who gives Christmas presents to every kid in the world, no matter what colour, creed, background, is about as culturally diverse as it's possible to be. What a load of old balls. More on that as well. Everything you need to know. And also the breaking news right here on Talk. Speaking of breaking news, we're just hearing that Chris Rea has died, aged 79. Now, Chris Rea, of course, who wrote what I think 74, I apologise, 74, I think reasonable to say, wrote what is, I reckon, one of the most favoured Christmas songs, Driving Home for Christmas. But when you said, what's your favourite Christmas song? That comes up time and time again. I heard it on a movie yesterday. What was that Kiefer Sutherland, Danny Dyer festive film? Can't remember, it's just come out. Watched a bit of that with the kids. And there it was again, Driving Home for Christmas, one of the most beautiful Christmas songs. And of course, Chris Rea's career was much bigger than just a Christmas song. 40 If You Think It's Over. I mean, the list goes on. He was ever present in that respect. Just a gifted, great songwriter. Who 2 days before Christmas has died aged 74. And by the way, Lizzie Cundy was in the video for Driving Home for Christmas. She must have been about 10 when she was in it. I know I'm being generous, Lizzie, who does listen. But yeah, she was in that video, Driving Home for Christmas, classic Christmas song, one of the best ever. Chris Rea died aged 74. Now this from Matt, who says, it's wonderful to see the leader of the opposition growing in her role. I remember her saying that she had time on her hands and wouldn't rush to perform for the gallery. Many commentators underestimated her. And as Oscar Redrop said to us a little earlier in the programme, what she's got to do now, she's got to take a couple of themes and really own them. She's got to really own them. Now, it's quite tricky when it comes to immigration because nobody can really kind of scupper Farage on that one. That's his, and no one's ever going to take that away from him. Nobody will speak as candidly and vividly as Nigel Farage will on that particular subject. She's got to take something. As Oscar said, she's also got to get a few scalps along the way. She's got to relentlessly pursue where she sees as oppositional injustice or wrongdoing and not let it go. But they've got to be the right scalps. They've got to be the right themes that she owns. And if she can do that with 2 or 3 things over the next half year, the position will change again for the leader of the opposition. We will watch with interest. Now, we mentioned this right at the top, shoplifters getting away with a theft nearly every single minute. We're talking about 800 offences a day that are closed without a suspect. And unsolved cases are up 65% in the last 5 years. Labour, of course, vowed to tackle the epidemic, but they've been saying this for a long time. Let's have a listen to Keir Starmer on this very issue.
So today I'm putting shoplifters on notice. You might get away with it under this weak Tory government. But if Labour takes power, we won't stand by while crime takes over our streets. We'll put 13,000 extra neighbourhood police on the beat. We'll scrap the shoplifters' charter, the £200 rule that stops the police investigating theft in your workplace. And we'll legislate to make sure assaulting and abusing shop workers is a standalone criminal offence because you deserve to feel safe at work.
There it is. We've put them on notice. Peter Blexley, former Met Police detective, with us. Afternoon to you, Peter. It does sound very vacuous, doesn't it, when I hear Starmer bang on about this stuff? I don't think anything's changed since he said that. I doubt anything will change under his stewardship in the subsequent months.
Well, just before the break, you talked about politicians not getting angry about things.
Yeah.
Well, here's a former police officer and crime and policing writer and commentator who's very, very angry about shoplifting because successive generations of politicians and policing leaders have allowed this to happen. And it runs far, far deeper than the losses that the shops incur and the extra higher prices that we all have to pay. It cuts across lawless Britain. And the figures you've quoted today are only the recorded crimes.
Yeah.
When I stood in my local news agency the other day and a youngster came in, swiped a tube of Pringles and a soft drink, hotly pursued by me, who stood zero chance of catching him, unfortunately, my mate, the shopkeeper, is not going to report that. Doesn't report it, didn't report it, like thousands of other shopkeepers, because they know the police won't attend and no one's going to get captured for it. So it's a waste of time. The problem runs far, far deeper. It's systematic of the managed and unstoppable decline of this once great nation. And when, inevitably, sadly, tragically, there is mass civil unrest in this country, shoplifting will have played a significant part.
And it's extraordinary, isn't it? Because, I mean, certainly when I was a kid, Peter, it wasn't ever seen as a kind of... I mean, it was always a serious crime. But the idea that you would be seen doing it and people would follow you around the shop and not do anything about it, or you couldn't get the police out on time, whatever, that was never a thing. What's fundamentally happened? I know we have a shortage of cops in some arenas of life or some areas. Is it just that? What's the deal here?
A couple of generations of stupid senior police officers have surrendered the streets. It's exactly what they did. They took people off of beat patrol because their academic chums told them that beat patrol didn't work. In other words, they couldn't measure its effectiveness. Whereas anybody who knows anything about looking after a neighbourhood, looking after a community, knows how valuable it is to have a visible presence on a beat that the public can get in contact with, who's known and who is there as a deterrent. But no, they scrapped all of that. Part of their thinking was we have to investigate crime behind closed doors, and I accept that, like domestic violence, sex abuse, has to be investigated. But they completely abandoned the streets. They completely got rid of police officers walking the beat. And in doing that, they surrendered the streets to the criminals. And that's where we're at. And at the moment, they show no sign of reinventing beat patrol, boots on the ground. And until they do, in sufficient numbers, things are only, sadly, going to get worse.
Yeah, and of course, there's now it's the cat's out the bag, so shoplifters are quite relaxed about it. I mean, half of them don't even put a balaclava on now. They just walk into the co-op, grab a load of booze and walk out again. They know that if there is a security guard there, they're not going to stop them. They might, ask them nicely to put the bag down, which counts for nothing. So it becomes a sort of self-fulfilling problem here, doesn't it? The more people, and there's many YouTube videos that people can look at, you can watch this stuff, all day long on loop if you want. There's so much out there that it's kind of almost given a green light to the offence, because it's not even seen as much of an offence now.
It's a complete green light, because the likelihood of being captured, detained, prosecuted and punished just does not exist. I went to a meeting last month. The Metropolitan Police are rolling out their new plan called Met Engage. Basically, it's a PR stunt whereby they try and convince everybody that we live in a crime-free nirvana. Well, of course, you can't pull the wool over the public's eyes. And when we were at this meeting with lots of top brass from the Met Police, the local superintendent in charge of policing for our area ridiculously, stupidly said, we cannot arrest our way out of the shoplifting problem. There were gasps in the audience. Members of the public, we looked at each other, because, of course, that's exactly how you get out of this problem. You arrest people. And when the police could mobilise in their thousands for civil disorder, necessary, for the Notting Hill Carnival, some would say necessary, they could mobilise if they wanted to, if they wanted to take the street bats and make us safe. But they don't care. They quite frankly don't care. All we get is this performative policing every now and again when they say, we've launched an initiative, we were on high streets today, we arrested so many people. But of course, the criminals know they were here today, but they won't be tomorrow. And so business as usual is resumed.
And while you're with us, Peter, just a word on this story that has just broken. 2 men have just been jailed for raping a teenage girl in Rotherham more than 2 decades ago. This was Kasur Ajib and Mohammed Mahmood, who got an 8.5-year and 7-year sentence for 1 count of rape, which is a lousy sentence in itself. What's equally as important as in this story is that the convictions relate to the same victim, who was aged between 14 and 16 at the time. And this was investigated as part of Operation Stovewood, which, of course, is the investigation into grooming and sexual abuse in Rotherham between the mid-90s and 2013. So it's significant for a number of reasons.
Yes, it is. And Operation Stovewood is carried out by the National Crime Agency, who have had a number of successes investigating these historical child rapists. Of course, the sentence is paltry and insufficient for the rape of a child. But however, I welcome and commend and thank the National Crime Agency. There's many more of these vile people that need to be arrested, charged and put in front of a court. And at some point, this nation will apply all levels of seriousness that should be to having white, vulnerable children raped.
Yeah. Peter, it's a grim note to finish on, but thank you for your time as ever. Have a peaceful and wonderful Christmas. Peter Blexley, of course.
Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
Big regular on the team sheet here at Talk. Former Met Police detective, thank you to him. 0344 499 1000. More of your calls and comments on the way. And, of course, we're responding to, as well, Chris Rea, the singer Chris Rea, who's died at the age of 74, according to a spokesperson for the family. Of course, Driving Home for Christmas is a massive, probably no more for that, but a big succession of hits in the 70s and 80s. Fool If You Think It's Over, Let's Dance, Road to Hell. There was another cracking track. He passed away peacefully in hospital earlier today following a short illness surrounded by his family. Born in Middlesbrough, he had previously been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer back in 2001. Today, the sad news that Chris Rea, aged 74, has died. Let's move on to lighter matters, and that is, of course, the voice of doom. We were hopeful, bearing in mind this is the last time this year. It's only day 5 of this mystery voice. Have another listen to the voice. This is the one we played you before the news.
Going to be community relations.
Very simple question. Who is that? These were some of the guesses. Carol Thatcher, no. Helen Whately, no. Arthur Mullard. Arthur Mullard was an old, large sitcom actor back in the 70s and 80s. And I think I'm right in saying he turned out to be an absolute wrong-un. It's a separate point, largely. Justine Greening, no. Edwina Currie, it is not. Harriet Baldwin, again, it's a big no. We haven't got a correct answer, which means the voice of doom will roll over to 2026. Stand by for all of that. This one comes in from Matt, who says the overwhelming majority of shoplifters are addicts. What about that? And who's buying their stolen goods? The stolen steaks, booze and cheese, not other addicts. Do something about addiction and things will change. You'd like to think so. It's a long way around it, though, isn't it? I mean, that could take several years. If you thought you were going to be... do you just give cattle prodders to supermarket? You know, if you could get a quick buzz in the buttocks as you run out of the supermarket, that might make you drop the booty. Don in Chelmsford. We've just been to our local supermarket and saw a tough-looking security guard physically shoving a young lout out of the store. Brilliant, says Don. You don't hear it, you don't see it enough, do you? I saw a fella in a large supermarket a little while ago who did... I'd never seen this before. In fact, it makes sense, and I'm sure this is quite a normal thing. What he did, he went to the self-service thing, and he put all his shopping through, and then he produced a card. He put the card up to the, you know, the pad, the thing you pay on, what do they call it, chip and pin thing, you know, that thing. And obviously it didn't buzz. He was next to me. It didn't buzz or anything. But it would have been enough for anyone looking on a camera to see the bloke paying. But of course he wasn't paying, and he walked out with about 40 quid's worth of, it was mostly steak. I remember thinking there's a lot of steak in that you've got, but it's, as our previous contributor just said, that's relevant to what happens. You sell it on for half the price, make yourself, you know, enough for half a gram or something or other. Josephine in Northwood says, afternoon Ian, really saddened to hear of Chris Rea's passing. Driving home for Christmas always makes me feel like Christmas really is coming. But he was a great emotive singer any time of year. I particularly love his song. Yeah, Josephine was another massive hit of Chris Rea, which I wish was recorded for me, even though it was beautifully written for his daughter. R.I.P. Chris, and thanks for the memories. Merry Christmas, Ian, and love to your family. Josephine, that's very kind, and thank you very much indeed. He was an emotive singer. He had an incredibly original voice. I mean, there's something really special about that guy's voice. And, of course, the Christmas song, which I would imagine Chris Rea lived comfortably off that one song alone, which would be played globally. How many movies does that appear in as well? How many Christmas commercials does that appear in? But it's always sad to hear. 2 days before Christmas. And Josephine, thank you for your nice tribute. We're going to pause momentarily. Back with more from you coming next on Talk.
You can't try and snipe at the Conservatives for things that weren't our fault.
Oh, I mean, I
This
haven't
is
got
not
time. Don't tell your big mate Donald Trump to tell his big mate Vladimir Putin to stop killing people. Then we can solve that problem like that.
Won't be surprised to know I disagree.
Why do you disagree, though? Why do you want our young people left on the scrap heap? The court's time being wasted, laying down a ruling on what is a woman. You and I have been speaking for far too many years about
And
this.
actually, you know, I'm very grateful to you too, because you have always covered this topic.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk. 0344 499 1000. Just a slight headphone adjustment, and we're back on. Last 1 p.m. show of the year for us. Loads going on here over the Christmas schedule, though, in the next few weeks. Remember, of course, Petri Hoskin is going to be here at Drive this afternoon in about half an hour's time or just over. Alex Phillips tonight at 7. At 10 this evening on The Late Show, Duncan Barks, a name many of you will be more than familiar with from the old TalkSport days. Duncan back on the team at 10 tonight. So there's loads to go through. And then tomorrow, Kevin O'Sullivan. I woke up this morning, I thought I was in a time vortex, and I forgot that it was Kev doing breakfast. I thought something had gone terribly wrong with my radio. But it was Kevin O'Sullivan doing a fine show on breakfast this morning. He's back tomorrow as well. Alex Petrie, Nick, Johnny Gould, Duncan Barks also on the team sheet for tomorrow too. Let's go to your calls. Andy is in Merseyside on that coalition idea. Andy, what are you thinking of it?
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Pleasure.
What's really bothering me about the whole idea of a coalition is that, one, I think there's going to be certain parts of the Conservative government that are still centre-left even. They've been dragged right over. But it may be a necessary evil, because one of the things I keep banging on about and really feel strongly about is I'm convinced there'll be no cooperation whatsoever with the civil service and a reform government.
Yeah, I keep thinking about that too.
I think that the ideologies that are so deeply ingrained in civil service life will not deal with a reform government.
Yeah.
And what will happen is there'll be a sense from the public of frustration, a sense that they've been sold a pup with the reform government. And what I really think is important now is for people like you who get to speak to people like Mr. Youssef and Nigel Farage and all those people at the top of reform, to actually tie them down to what their plan is to deal with the civil service if they do become the next government, which it looks like it's going to be the case.
I've never thought the civil service. You know, we often talk about the sort of lefty blob that the civil service is. I don't think it's lefty. I think it's lazy, actually. I think that's the biggest problem, Andy, that it doesn't, fundamental change in the civil service is a pain in the neck.
Well, I don't know about that, but what I wouldn't necessarily agree with you there on that. I think there are probably a lot of hard-working civil servants out there who get battered with a fair number, I would imagine, who don't actually earn a day's wage. But the reality is I think we're going to have problems with a reform government and managing what is a beast. They will not be able to handle it, and their greenness of being new to power and the fact that they're going to end up entrenched in battles with the civil service to get any of the policies they want.
Yeah. Do you think that? I mean, without knowing fully how what the legal position is in terms of power of the civil service, permanent secretaries, and all the kind of very senior people in education and health and those departments, it might even take some kind of change in law that reform have to put in a manifesto to ensure that they will have the right tools in place that can't be met with resistance in the civil service?
Well, you see, I think what we're getting and what we will get is comments like, well, we're just going to sack them all. We'll just deal with them. We'll just deal with them and whitewash over. And the real important thing is to have a plan of action to deal with it, because I fear that it will get to a stage, say 2029, if it goes that long, we get a new government in, and basically what will happen is we'll end up in a situation where they can't make any movement on the things that they've been elected to do. Therefore, the public become frustrated, and then we've got effectively a Labour government not fit for purpose, a Conservative government not fit for purpose, and a Reform government not fit for purpose, and we're in this doom loop going nowhere.
Well, I think I've met a couple, not loads, over my time, Andy, of these kind of senior bods in the civil service, and I wouldn't describe them, which is why I mentioned at the beginning about them. I don't think it's a lefty versus right thing. These are they're sort of very global types. They're very centrist and usually incredibly intelligent people. And it gives them a sort of, the position they've got where they often earn much more than the minister, than they are apparently are meant to be serving. So they're on a better wage, they've got a better clout, they remain there when ministers and secretaries of state change, they remain there when governments change as well, and that's always rather interesting. I think they're sort of status quo mongers who think that the way the world runs is broadly okay, and that everything is, the immigration, every now and again there'll be a flare-up and people like us will whinge about it, but actually it's not a big issue. I think that's how the likes of David Cameron's government would have looked at it. We know people they get annoyed, but it's not a big issue. But it is a big issue, of course.
Well, you see, you've used the word status quo, but really what we're finding now is that there's so many people dissatisfied with the last, say, quarter of a century of status quo.
Yeah, agree.
And so I fear that we're going to be in a situation without any cooperation, a reform government, which some people are taking as the view of the last roll of the dice as far as British government's concerned.
Yeah, there is that sense. There is that sense.
If the last roll of the dice is going to be up against people who do not want, and as you say, just want that status quo, we're going to end up in a situation where basically nothing gets done.
Yeah.
And as I say, we're in that doom loop again, and people in 2030, 2031 are saying, well, that was a bloody waste of time.
Yeah, and that's what a horrible place to be. You gave me the shivers when you said that. Listen, Andy, thank you very much for that. Have a great Christmas, Andy, in Merseyside. I don't know what the answer is. This is a whole area that's sort of opening up. What I don't want to do is, and I hear it said all the time on social media, drain the swamp and all the business, the civils, and it's a great sort of get out for politicians to blame the civil service when sometimes actually it is the politicians that have got it wrong. And if you speak to senior politicians about working with good civil servants, I always use Nadine Dorries as the example here. Now, Nadine Dorries isn't somebody you associate with being some lily-livered lefty, but she talks about the group of civil servants she worked with were worth their weight in gold, the very best of the best. And they made her job a whole lot easier, which is part of the point, and they did exactly what the agenda said they needed to do. She didn't meet resistance. It was fine. Now, that was in the culture department. Maybe they're a little more, I don't know, susceptible to change in the culture department. When it comes to the big departments of state, like the Treasury and areas such as that, I do wonder whether you do have this grip on power where, the permanent secretaries, and remember, we always talk about this mysterious figure called the permanent secretary, that's just the head honcho. The head honcho has a whole team around him or her that, are making, all manner of incredibly important decisions. Now, they can't literally say to a Prime Minister, you are not doing that. They can make times rough. I genuinely believe it's mostly the adherence to the status quo, that there is a set way of governing. You can tweak it over here, you can tweak it over there, but broadly speaking, it will always come back to this certain way of doing it. And if you want to overhaul it to such magnitude it becomes unrecognisable, then you'd need 20 years. That's how I think the civil service view it. 0344 499 1000. More coming from you next on Talk. The time now, 3:30.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is indeed Talk. This one comes in from Alan. He says, I was born and bred in Middlesbrough and have fond memories of Chris Rea and his family, who ran a couple of cafes in the town, and queues outside of them for ice cream were notoriously long. Was he? I think he was of Italian descent, wasn't he? Although a Middlesbrough boy, I think his family background was it. Whether that's got anything to do with the ice cream, I don't know. Maybe I'm just stereotyping. A brilliant, unique voice and an ambassador for the area. Never lost his accent or forgot his roots. Sad day, says Alan. Absolutely. And Ian in Glasgow says, just wanted to say, have a great Christmas to you all and everybody at Talk. Thanks for a brilliant afternoon show throughout the course of the year. We'll have the alarm clock set early for the breakfast show. Yes, Ian, thank you very much. And the same to you as well, and to your family too. It goes without saying, you know, a massive happy Christmas from us with the most loyal listening base, I think, of any outfit anywhere on the planet. It continues to grow, and thank you to everybody who tunes in, certainly for us at 1 o'clock. But for next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday and Friday, we'll be doing the breakfast show. So that's early rises, always a bit tricky, but I'm okay with that, just for those 4 days between now and New Year. Now let's move to this story. And that is, of course, the issue of Keir Starmer banning social media, a kind of an Australian-style ban. Could he ever get away with something like that? When I say get away with it, I mean, could he implement it with success? John Taylor is a former detective and child safeguarding consultant. John, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian. How are you?
I'm all right, thanks. I always think I felt the same with the Australian thing. You know, you could say, OK, you know, full house points to Australia for trying to do something about a problem. Very much the thin end of the wedge, not necessarily implemented to be foolproof. But, of course, if it's about kids seeing bad stuff online, then you'd need to ban the internet, not just social media. So there's a few issues around this, even if it comes with good intentions. Does that make sense?
Perfect sense. I mean, I've been talking about this for well over a year now. You know, a lot of people are comparing it to the Online Safety Act, which I've been quite outspoken there, saying that's not going to work. Well, it isn't going to work now. And then you've got what Australia putting in place. And a bit like what you just said there, I congratulate them. And the caveat is anything that's done to protect a child, online or even offline, we welcome. End of. But is it going to work? Because it's been in too long. Children of very young ages are so used to having those smart devices, and being able to install, get an app, etc. So you actually have to break down and say, okay, how are you going to implement it? How are you going to enforce it? And other platforms, obviously with the Australian government, the way they've set it out, the onus is on the platforms, not the users, not the parents. It's down to the platforms. And they basically got to take reasonable steps to ensure that nobody under 16 is on there. So if you read their terms and conditions, they do all that. So therefore, it does come back to being the onus on the users saying, I won't do it. I won't use a VPN. I won't pretend to be 16. I won't use AI to actually make myself look older. This is what's going to happen. So I think the crux of this will be in about 10 months, 12 months time when we start to see data, whether or not figures like online grooming, self-generated imagery has gone down. We won't know till then.
And this is the problem. I mentioned at the beginning, not mischievously, but the internet is ultimately the issue here, isn't it? I mean, social media, of course, captures everybody's imagination. But if we don't want kids to see terrible things, we know that you can, get onto all sorts of sites. If you're looking for people fighting, YouTube might be the biggest video platform, but there are many others out there. There's independent people who just have their own websites with some pretty unsavoury stuff on there. So whether it's sexual, whether it's violence, whether it's racism, sexism, homophobia, any of those things can simply be found if you have no social media at all.
Yeah, and that brings into question in many ways what I say to a lot of people. Well, no app, website, device, etc. has ever been created to be dangerous. It becomes dangerous because of the users.
Yeah.
And that's why education is so important. And then you break it down to say, well, what have we got here? I mean, again, well done, Australia. But they've only looked at about 8 or 9, perhaps, if you include YouTube, actual platforms. Personally, I go to schools now and say, well, who's using Telegram? Discord isn't even included on there. Now, that's far more popular than Twitch.
Yeah.
So, again, it's the right thing that they're doing, but they haven't really sat down and said, well, which ones should we aim at? Which ones are the ones that are causing issues? You actually, I know you've covered this before, but you've got AI companionship now. And if you look at character AI causing all the issues, that's what they should be looking at, because the advancements that we know, again, it's like we're trying to, it's like shutting the barn door after the horse has bolted. Some of those aren't really being used anymore. So I think they're targeting, again, individual platforms. They should be looking at others.
What hope is there, do you sense, when the Prime Minister and others talk about adopting this? Are they listening to this wider conversation that we're having here, John?
Yes and no. I think they will be. I mean, you've got a lot in the press at the moment, with yourselves included, covering things like, even though people might think there's no link, of course there's a link, grooming gangs. Everything's being talked about now when it comes down to safeguarding children, so they will be listening. But of course, they've only just launched, in many ways, the Online Safety Act. So they've got to wait to see where that's going to be. And of course, that's to do with content, as you quite rightly said at the start, rather than the complete ban. Now, most of us, or certainly people my age, would like to go back in time and say, when it first came out, make it 18. But we haven't got that ability now. We've got to be very careful where we are here, because you have got, I know in Australia, you've got about 4 or 5 lawsuits going through. I know Reddit, they're actually putting a lawsuit in place saying this is a bit basically unfair. So you're going to have a lot of, 2 15-year-olds. And if you start to look at, I want to see this data in the 10 months' time, because a lot of the issues around, 15, 16, 17-year-olds, by definition, these are still children. Yeah. And these are the ones that are being hurt. These are the ones that are suffering from grooming or some sort of sexual abuse. So we have got that. So you're quite right. It's the internet that's got the issue of what other people are doing. So it'll be very interesting to see what data comes up, because personally, I've got to be honest, they are listening. I've got a sneaky suspicion that in 12 months' time, we'll be told, oh, this is really working. But the data won't tell us that.
Yeah, and there's the bigger problem. John, thank you very much indeed for that. John Taylor is a former detective and child safeguarding consultant. We are ultimately talking about the internet when it comes to all of this kind of stuff. I don't know how you police it with kids, because the stuff, there's very few areas of life in our history. If you take pornographic magazines, they were in, sort of soft porn would be available to buy in the newsagents, but it would kind of be on a top shelf. You wouldn't get soft porn mixed in with you wouldn't have Playboy or Men Only mixed in with the Beano and Look-In magazine or Smash Hits or something. It just wouldn't happen. But of course the internet does that. It mixes everything because you just look up whatever you want. So your kid gets homework. To do the homework, they need Safari or Chrome because they've got to look stuff up. Happened to my kid. He's 11 the other day. Had to do his homework on a laptop. So he was researching stuff on the laptop. Now, that very same search engine will give him access to anything if he so wanted to. How do you stop that? Other than sit there with your kid, you can have certain settings that will attempt to cut out certain things. That also do you know, it's a bit like not giving your kid too many sweets and then they go to a party and get a goodie bag, right? And it's full of Haribos. So you think, well, the best one in the world, so now my kid is on the Haribo journey. That there's no way back from that. So you say, well, you're not going to have any sweets, and they go on another, and this is the same thing. You could have every measure in place, and you could sit your kid in front of a security camera to make sure they're not looking at anything iffy. But then they go to a mate's house. Not every single mate, it's always going to be there. They're on the bus on the school bus or in the school playground with sometimes older kids who've got smartphones. They can look everything up. Not every one of those kids comes from a family where they've put the parental settings in or they've found the way around it. I genuinely, it's curious, isn't it? You know, we live in a world of AI where you should be able to stop anything like that really easily. It's almost as if it's been designed to not stop you looking at bad stuff. Because I can't believe when you consider artificial intelligence that can make you a Pixar-like video featuring your family and friends as the central characters. It can do that for you in about an hour. Okay, less than that if you want a low-grade one. But it can't stop you looking at filth or violence or racism or something awful online. We haven't got that capability. You look at it that way, isn't that a bit odd? I think it is. Let's go back to where we began on our main subject. Richard is in North London. Richard, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Hey, Ian. Nice to talk to you again.
You too.
I mean, it's interesting. Again, I mean, I listened to the debate about the Reform and the Conservatives. I just go back to this point that I just think, we'll put it this way, sometimes outsiders can see things better than we can. Mm-hmm. And when Trump supported that or reposted that tweet last week that basically said Britain was approaching civilizational collapse, people over here just ignored it. And then, of course, the country's not falling apart. But my concern, and for a number of years really, is that Britain is sort of becoming unmanageable. And there are really two examples. First of all, we know government spending is too high. I think I said to you earlier in the year, even under the Conservatives, government spending was 42k per household per year. And yet nobody, not the politicians, and I can't even sense the people have got any idea how they want to reduce that. Because if they had, then people would be saying, look, we know we've got at least three things that are unmanageable. First of all, the state pension, that's unaffordable. Secondly, the NHS, that's been unaffordable for, 2 decades, Ian?
Yeah.
Even state education. I mean, there was a story last week that because of the growth of special needs, some of the special needs places are costing 100k per year.
Yeah.
So in a sense, we've got this is a really big problem because we can't seem to see the scale of some of these problems, and I think it's leading to really a sort of a further problem, which I think is delusional thinking. Mm-hmm. If you listen to some of the reform supporters, they're talking about remigration or mass deportations, and yet only a couple of weeks ago, Danny Kruger says they want to sack 57,000 civil servants. Now, if Danny Kruger had said that there's an institutional problem in the Home Office, and I mean, really, this is Ben Habib's idea, the Home Office has been taken over by Fabians, we will have to look at decommissioning this part of government, then that would have been better. But you're not going to. But it seems like there's so much fag packet thinking over there, and you're not going to send anybody back if you're going to cut loads of civil servants. They're not joining the dots. And I think the other thing about delusional thinking, Ian, sorry, but I mean, we come back to Brexit because even the Daily Telegraph has acknowledged that although it might have been a success in terms of sovereignty, we've lost 8% of GDP, and all the economists are saying that now. So, in a sense, what I hear from Reform is, well, if we get Brexit right, then it's going to be better. But the reality is, nobody else thinks that, Ian, because people like Nigel Farage and Julia Hartley-Brewer, they got the Brexit they wanted. They got a hard Brexit. So that
don't they argue? I mean, Nigel Farage argues we didn't get Brexit at all because we haven't done it properly.
Utterly delusional. I mean, utterly delusional. Because
why is that delusional, though, Richard? Given that he will talk about that. If he was sitting here now, he'd talk for an hour on why we haven't got Brexit. He wouldn't just say it.
And that's the third problem because the fact that the problems are so complex is leading, I think, to frankly simpletons taking charge in politics. We've seen it with this government. They had 14 years to prepare a policy. They still have no idea how to go about economic growth. Sure. And Nigel Farage, I mean, the reality is he was the one saying we'll have a hard Brexit. Germany will beg for a trade deal. No, they didn't. The European Union threatened us over the Irish border. They said, well, look, if you have a hard border, you're going to have terrorism back. So that's how determined the Europeans were to actually make Brexit hard for us. And the reality is, Ian, I mean, I'll hold my hand up. I think Brexit was right from the point of view of sovereignty, but from the point of view of economics, I just think Nigel's going to have to say, it's going to be a bit like Clause 4. Labour had to accept that they could no longer have a commitment to nationalising the commanding heights of British industry. And I think someone at Reform is going to have to say, OK, Brexit was about sovereignty, but in terms of economics, it hasn't worked. And when you think about it, I mean, sorry, just make an extra point. We've obviously harmed our relationship with the European Union in terms of trade. I gather car manufacturing is about 50% of what it was 10 years ago. Now, obviously, COVID's involved in that, and also the impact of the green taxes. But there has to be something there to do with damaging our...
But what, I mean, an outsider coming down to this argument would say, well, hang on a second, what about, India and Japan and all these other countries? They're not part of the EU. How do they rub along so well?
No, but they're much better economies than ours. I mean, well, not so much India, but
it's not a law. The point I always come back to, Richard, it's not a law of physics that the only way you can be economically sound is to be in the EU.
No, it's not. But the reality is, Ian, if you look at just one last point on this, they trumpet the fact that we have trade deals with the US and trade deals with India, but I mean, a trade deal with the US is not worth the paper it's written on because because of Trump's moods, and ultimately a trade deal with the US is a trade deal with a country that's never going to buy anything from you. Let's be honest. And a trade deal with India, I mean, the Indians just use that to actually leverage for more free movement. I mean, yes, I think if we face up to some hard questions, I don't want us to go back into the EU. I think it's done with. I think we've got to look at places like South Korea and Taiwan where they have but Ian, a much smaller state. And that comes back to my first point. People have got to decide if we want to pay less taxes, what are we going to give up? Because the reality is, in somewhere like South Korea, no one's going to spend 100k on a special needs place.
It's a good point. Listen, Richard, I've got to step in just because of time. It's a fascinating debate, and we'll come back to this one, I'm sure, many times in the year ahead when we're back after the holiday, because there is so much to be said on this. And even people who voted for Brexit are saying, well, OK, that's fine, but what's the next move? And how do we make that move, grow the economy and have lower taxes and all of those things? More on that, I'm sure, to come. Thank you to Richard in North London. Don't go away, Jill, with you shortly. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
You can't try and snipe at the Conservatives for things that weren't our fault.
Oh, I mean, I
This
haven't
is
got
not one.
time. Don't tell your big mate Donald Trump to tell his big mate Vladimir Putin to stop killing people. Then we can solve that problem like that.
Won't be surprised to know I disagree.
Why? Why do you disagree, though? Why do you want our young people left on the scrap heap? The court's time being wasted, laying down a ruling on what is a woman. You and I have been speaking for far too many years about
And
this.
actually, you know, I'm very grateful to you too, because you have always covered this topic.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This comes in from Gary, who says, I think the support for reform is being understated in the opinion polls because inexplicably there are still a lot of people who think there is a degree of shame associated with telling anybody, including a pollster, that they're going to vote reform. There is always, there used to be the shy Tory thing, isn't there? I think there's now a chronically shy reform voter. That said, says Gary, by the time the next general election comes, you can bet your bottom dollar that all the parties on the left are going to be doing panic deals with each other to make sure that they only stand one candidate between them in certain seats where Reform has a good chance of winning. So Reform and the Cons will need to make a pragmatic approach and do similar deals with each other to prevent being squeezed out by the left. The truth is that whilst Farage will never admit it, a deal like that may actually suit him, as I can't see Reform getting 650 high-quality candidates to stand one in every constituency without a fair number of those ending up being exposed as inadequate and a bit of an embarrassment to the party. Better to concentrate on around 400 or 450 seats and end up, at worst, being the senior partner in a coalition government. That's a really good point. And I think that, we're not, I wouldn't say gerrymandering, but the movement of standing down candidates, certain characters, is inevitable. It's absolutely inevitable. Jill is in Cornwall on the coalition idea. What do you make of it, Jill? Afternoon to you.
Hello, Ian. Well, what I make of it is the actual proof that politicians, to be perfectly honest, obviously lie to get what they want, and then when they get what they want, they do what they want.
Outrageous cynicism on your part, Jill.
Well, it's the it's the truth. And my concern is that, yes, it seems quite a good idea for the Conservatives to mix with Reform, providing the right politicians from Conservative move in with Reform, and we've got the right politicians in Reform to bring it together to provide us with a party that will actually tell us the truth and promise us the truth. And what's happening is we're now in a situation where every promise that was made by the Labour Party, they didn't mean a blinking word of it, because they've changed their minds, they've gone back on everything, they've proved themselves to be not trustable, some of the politicians, and we're now stuck with a Labour Party and a government that basically could do us more harm than good before the next election anyway. I'm just losing my
will to live.
My belief in the fact that elections actually work, and we get people in who want to help this country, because at the moment we've got a party that doesn't give a stuff about the people who pay their wages. They're doing what they want, with and when they want, and the people of this country who supported them and pay their wage now can just push off.
Well, we've got a government, we've got a party that hasn't got any kind of tangible direction or philosophy. There's no sort of sense where you go, OK, I disagree with them, but I can see where they're going. There's none of that, and that's always been the case. And we got sort of slightly scuppered, I think, or some would say surprised, others not so surprised, that given they'd had 14 years to rehearse for this moment and Starmer had had a good half a decade, we sort of imagined they'd come in with a big grand plan. It was all ready to go. Turns out they thought that just not being the Tories was enough to govern successfully, and it wasn't. Jill, thank you very much indeed for that. Have a very happy Christmas. Jill in Cornwall. This is Petrie down in London. Petrie, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Nice to see you.
Do you know, all the years that I've known you, I don't think we've ever handed over.
I don't think we have,
always been at different shows. Yeah. Even in other places.
And on occasions where you were on air first, I always refused to do a handover
obviously,
because of our creative differences.
Yes, because we are considered polar opposites.
Absolutely right. Do you say Happy Christmas or Merry Christmas? And does it matter?
I say bar humbug.
Do you really? Are you a miserable old
I am.
Do you not like Christmas?
I am a Grinch. I can't bear it.
Can you really?
I can't bear it.
None of it?
All of that false love and jolly.
So when you go out and see the decorations up, that doesn't do something to you? You don't go, wow, this is amazing. Look, there's Santa and there's some Rudolphs and lights and glitter.
No.
The Christmas paper.
I mean, I've never met Santa, and I would love to. And I'm sure he's very busy. I know he does.
I had a word the other
No, I'm a Grinch. I'm a total Grinch.
So you
I think it's because I came from in a divorced family.
Yeah.
So I used to have 2 Christmases every year.
Right, that's a bad thing?
So I was Christmased